Good evening. I want to convene the regular meeting of the Tuesday, August 7th of the Brattleboro Select Board. We know the meeting has been properly warned because we were here at 5:15 for an executive session. I would love to entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the July 17th meeting.
So moved.
We have a motion to approve the minutes of the July 17th meeting. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? No. Motion carries 3-0. I just want to make note that there are 3 of us here tonight, so any vote we take, if it's going to pass, it has to be by all 3 of us.
All right.
First up is chair's remarks, and all I have to say is it was really wet and hot out. So I can't think of anything else. So I'll pass it over to the town manager.
Thank you. And I just have a quick announcement. We did send a news release out about this, so I believe that some people in the public will have seen note of it that way. But to reach a wider audience, we want everybody to know that on Friday at midday, the town offices will be closed for an hour and a half between 11:30 and 1 p.m., with the exception of the town clerk's office, which will be open for people all day long from 8:30 in the morning to 5 p.m. on Friday, and then again from 9 a.m. until noon on Saturday for early voting in the primary election. But the other town offices will be closed for the town employees to gather for our annual picnic, which we always do in the early part of August. So again, that's from 11:30 until 1 p.m. on Friday the 10th. All the emergency services, of course, will be provided as usual throughout the community.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
Does anyone on the select board have any comments or committee reports that they'd like to make at this particular moment?
I don't.
I don't either.
Great. We're whipping. Now it's time for public participation, which is the time in the meeting where the public is given the opportunity to weigh in on any issue that is not on tonight's agenda. So would anyone like to weigh in? Dick? And please come and tell us who you are and where you're from. Although we know who you are, Dick.
Gray, Brattleboro. I have 3 issues I want to talk about briefly. No particular order, but one of importance to me is we have a historic covered bridge in West Brattleboro. And the real travesty about the historic covered bridge is you couldn't find it with Google Maps. It is so overgrown on both sides of the bridge that you can't see the bridge anymore. And I'm going to ask you to try to find some funding in your budget, because I certainly don't think that the rec department and their staffing and or Public Works has the people to get in there and clean up and do the job that's need to be done to clean up all that scrub brush, and that's all it is scrub brush. A couple of years ago, I was able to get the horticulture department up at the high school to get down there, and or the woods program, whatever that is, to get in there and clean up. And you could, when you were traveling down Western Ave, traveling east, you could see the bridge, pick it up, and it really looked good to be able to see it. And actually, we had it, if you were heading out of town, you could pick it up. Nothing on the western side has ever been done. And I was on the bridge 2 weeks ago on a Saturday, and a painter came down, and he wanted to paint the bridge. He was from Claremont, New Hampshire. And he said, "This is so overgrown that I guess I'll have to come back in the fall when all the leaves have fallen off all of these trees." And I think it's a real travesty that we don't maintain that and get it cleaned up, and then get it as part of the budget so it is treated, it is trimmed every year just like we cut the grass, so people can see that beautiful, beautiful bridge. We have people coming every day, and that picture is getting smaller because of that overgrowth is not being cut back. So if you could find a way to do that, especially with fall foliage season coming up, that would be deeply appreciated.
I'm down with that.
Item 2 for me, listening to the news today, always disappointed when I hear that the pool is going to close August 19th. I think we need to do a better job in keeping that pool open until the day after Labor Day. I've said this before, I said it as a board member. We need to, I know they say that they lose their lifeguards, but there was a big thing on the news where older people, retired people are becoming lifeguards. because they can't find younger lifeguards. So I think we need to find a way to be able to keep that pool open. We just spent $500,000 on it last year, and to have it open for 6 weeks is not a good expenditure of money.
I agree with that too.
The last thing I want to ask you about is, I was here in June, and Kate, you weren't here, and I was talking about the panhandling issue and what a severe problem that it has become and how it has changed downtown. Mr. Scholes and Mrs. Ganders, Tim wasn't here either, asked to have it put on the agenda. We're into the first week of August, and I have not seen anything on the agenda. I spoke to Mr. Fisher about an idea I had. I actually mentioned it to Kate. I mentioned it to Tim. I thought I briefly touched about it with you, not in a long conversation, down at the picnic. And I also spoke to the chief about doing an ordinance where people can panhandle
Oh, yeah.
versus to where they can't. Because everybody seems to be hung up on this free speech issue. And I haven't heard back from anybody. I don't know what research anybody has done, but I would ask you to get this on the agenda because it has become an increasingly difficult problem downtown, even from when I was here before, and I would love to be part of a discussion for that. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Dick.
I agree with points 1 and 2 there.
Is there anyone else? Yes, please come on up. We've missed you.
Yeah, Nick. That was a nice surprise to see you.
It's nice to be out of my apartment and among young, healthy people.
We're glad you're
Consider
here.
yourself young.
Thank you.
I'm Nick Nickerson, 5 years in Brattleboro, 67 years in the South. And one of my pet worries is the increasing power of the drug cartels. Thankfully, they're still fighting among themselves. If there's ever one universal drug cartel, we're in big trouble. And I just read in the Week magazine, a tremendous little magazine, and if Director Starr is listening, maybe she could get it for the library. An article discussed the elections in Mexico beginning last September and ending just recently. During that time, 120 candidates for office were killed by the drug cartels because they weren't their men. They didn't speak for the drug cartels. And I worry that this is going to spread to America. There's nothing to stop them. They have trillions of dollars. They're absolutely ruthless. You have a choice between giving into a bribe, which is called plata, or giving into the lead from a bullet, which is called plomo, plata o plomo. Well, there's no way we can resist that. I don't even think the chief could resist it, especially if you were told your family would be eliminated if you didn't go along with a small task that they wanted you to do. So I hope that we will eliminate this farcical, tragic war on drugs and allow drugs to be legalized and given and monitored by the government. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Nick.
you.
Thanks for coming out of your apartment and joining us again. It's been a long time.
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
Yes.
Is there anyone else in the public who would like to talk about something that's not on tonight's agenda? Seeing none, we're going to move on. We're going to wait and convene as liquor commissioners to talk about the Brattleboro Area Prevention Coalition. Cassandra Holloway has a conflict, and she's going to get here as soon as she can. And when she
Okay.
gets here, then we will go wherever it fits into the agenda. We're going to go into liquor commissioners.
Crazy babies out there.
So our first order of business is actually unfinished business, and that's the downtown parking matters.
Right on.
And I think what we're going to do is we're going to have, we're going to hear a presentation by Patrick, then we'll have the select board ask questions, and then we'll open it up to the public to ask questions and make comments, and then we'll decide what we want to do.
Great.
And this is the first of 2 meetings where we're going to discuss 2 separate sets of issues. And tonight is mostly about parking payment options.
Excellent, thank you. And good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
So just a little bit of history, kind of how we got here, and I'm sure the board will recall that last year in 2017, the town engaged the services of Desmond Design Management to assist us in a parking study that was work primarily needed for the planning office in the preparation to the new town plan. But we were thankful for their work, and they assigned Andy Hill, and he and his staff took a look at the parking capacity in Brattleboro. They took a look at our usage patterns, and they also examined the needs for infrastructure improvements. They delivered a report to the select board, final report with a series of recommendations, and the board got to review that, and that was in May of 2018. Since that time, the board has taken up parking issues on two separate occasions, on May 15th and again on June 5th. And in each of those discussions, one of the objectives was to decide how best to implement some of the recommendations coming out of that report. Tonight, specifically, what we'll be taking a look at is smart parking, some very needed repairs in the transportation center, and bicycle parking in the downtown, which were issues raised in the parking report. Now, what has been really clear, I've been trying to listen to what's coming from the board in terms of what are some priorities in implementing some of these recommendations. And what we've heard has been pretty clear in that the board is interested in seeing a wholesale transition to a smart parking system rather than a slow and incremental change. And then secondly, that we're interested in seeing what you might call a complete transition, that being one which incorporates both smart parking meters and kiosks, but also provides a cell phone application so that regardless of how someone would like to pay for their parking, they have as much flexibility and convenience as possible. So that's what staff's heard, and that's what staff's going to try and bring back a recommendation on how we can achieve that. In order to do a wholesale improvement of all of our infrastructure, that would require 196 new parking meters and 15 new kiosks. We believe this can be purchased in the amount of just about $260,000. That would be using the procurement performed by the Education Service Center of Abilene, Texas, which awarded a contract to IPS Group. This, you will recall, was discussed back at the meeting in May. If the select board agrees, staff recommends that we take another step, which is to phase out the use of the smart cards. This is sort of an older technology and not as flexible and as universal as credit and debit cards are these days. We recognize that there is likely value on cards owned in the community, and so we would recommend that we engage the public, we inform them that we're phasing that technology out. We ask that they bring those cards to the transportation center, to the parking office, where they could be, the value on them could be assessed, and we could process a refund to those folks. Staff believes this would cost about $15,000 is about the maximum. Staff further recommends that we enhance the smart parking equipment with a smart parking app. Specifically, we would recommend the app offered by the IPS Group, which would guarantee a seamless financial and programmatic reporting system. The upfront cost of this is $0, which would bring the total upfront cost for a wholesale transition and a complete transition to $275,000. That would be $260,000 for the equipment itself and $15,000 for the refund of the value on the smart cards. So the question then becomes, how do we make this happen? How do we do this? Certainly $275,000 is more than the parking fund has in terms of available cash on hand. So we're going to need to borrow. We could easily approach local financial institutions as we have recently, but we could also consider an interfund loan from the utility fund. This would be a loan in between the parking fund and the utility fund, where the parking fund pays back the principal with interest to the utility fund according to terms that the select board approves. How long would it take to pay this back? Well, interestingly enough, not that long. The town makes its final payment on the bond for the transportation center in fiscal 21. We're in fiscal 19 now. Once that bond payment is complete, that would free up about $192,000 each year in the parking fund. And so under a scenario that the board would eventually approve, the parking fund could repay the utility fund in 2 payments over fiscal years 22 and 23. So that addresses the upfront cost. Second question is, how do we address the operating costs? Because whether we're talking about a cell phone app program or whether we're talking about smart parking meters and kiosks, there is a back-end operational cost, and we've estimated that at being about $50,000 a year for the wholesale improvement. That would be all the meters, all the kiosks, and the app. So how could we address the ongoing operational expense? And staff would recommend that we consider an increase in the parking rates. Included in the board's packet was a series of scenarios, actually there are 4 of them, that outline the anticipated impact of 4 different parking rate scenarios. The first one at the top of the page just shows the anticipated increase from transitioning to accepting credit cards, which has been shown time and time again to, in and of itself, increase the revenue within the parking system. However, we don't see it as being enough to fully cover the operational costs, so we believe something else is going to need to happen. So in the second group in the chart, you can see if we were to add a nickel to the cost of parking at all various locations in town, what would the impact of that be? And that would be a slight increase. The next grouping.
Before you go on,
Yep.
it says decrease, but we want to make sure everybody knows it's an increase.
Sure, yeah, that's true. It was my error in labeling.
Yeah.
The first grouping shows a decrease, and that's what should have the term decrease applied to it. The point there in the top group is that we don't believe the transition to credit cards would be sufficient to cover the ongoing operational cost.
Yeah.
In each of the next scenarios, second, third, and fourth, we're talking about an increase.
Yeah.
So in the second scenario, we would be talking about a 5-cent per hour increase in each lot. In the third scenario, we'd be talking about raising the cost of parking on Main Street from 75 cents per hour to $1 per hour. In the fourth scenario, in the final scenario, the one which staff would recommend, we're combining those two. We're getting the increase from credit cards, we're raising the rate on Main Street to $1 per hour, and we're raising the rates by a nickel at each other location all throughout the parking system. The combined impact of this is estimated to be about $62,000 a year additional revenue to the parking fund, which is going to cover the cost to operate all of these convenience features without imposing that burden upon the parking public, and it will add additional cash on hand to the parking fund each year, which frankly the parking fund could use. We're a little slow in our ability to respond to infrastructure problems. I think we can all agree that the Harmony lot was not in good shape for a very long period of time. With additional cash resources coming into the parking fund, we will be able to make improvements on a quicker scale. And one other point I'd like to make about raising the rate of parking on Main Street is that, as you'll recall in the parking study, it was a recommendation by Andy Hill and everybody else at Desmond that we increase the rate on Main Street in an effort to free up some usage of the metered spaces on Main Street and make the downtown appear, particularly to visitors, to be a little bit more inviting, and that there is available parking within easy reach. So if we were to follow this game plan, we would be achieving two goals. We would be increasing the cash on hand available within the parking fund each year to be able to address other infrastructure problems, and we would be taking a step towards alleviating some of the congestion on Main Street itself. If
Now
the
you'll
board
take our
would
questions.
have any questions, I'm available to help.
Brandy or Tim, do you have any questions?
Sure, here and there. That's a good summary, thank you. My first question was, is there a little bit of evidence, I'm hoping, that this IPS group app might be decent? I mean, not all apps are created equal. I'm just curious if in your research you've come across municipalities, I'm not sure who you've been talking to, but if they've been happy with the app overall, or
Sure. Interestingly enough, none of the other communities in Vermont are utilizing both a app and a smart meter system. There are some in New Jersey and New York. I've been in contact with them, and they're satisfied with the results.
okay.
But I would just only like to add, from an operational standpoint, utilizing one system that sort of provides for seamless integration and data for analysis, I think would be useful, but not essential.
So to tack on to that, what are, just anecdotally, other people in Vermont doing, other municipalities? If they're not utilizing a tag team system, what are they doing?
Relatively few municipalities in Vermont regulate parking at all. It's actually a fairly limited club. And we're probably towards the back end of those that have made a transition to using smart meters.
Okay.
So the other communities in Vermont are at a stage where they're using smart meters and kiosks.
Is it us, Burlington,
South
Waterbury,
Burlington, Montpelier,
Montpelier.
Woodstock.
Bennington?
Pardon?
I don't know if Bennington is.
I don't believe Bennington is.
No.
And Barry is not.
Rutland?
Could be.
Rutland does, because I had to pump the meter about a week ago.
It's a relatively limited club in Vermont.
And certainly surrounding towns.
It just was curious, yeah. And we're different, I'm not trying to be weird, but, we specifically draw from a market from New York and Boston and Springfield and Holyoke and that are used to metering, and so it doesn't really make me uncomfortable.
I think I'd just make a comment on the increase, that it seems like 5 cents on the surface lots is a very, it's barely, when you think about it, I think it's been 15 years since an increase. You could really consider that not even an increase, it's just a cost of
Pavement?
maintaining. Certainly going from 3/4 giving you an hour to 4 is a difference that's going to be felt. But
I agree with that.
the more I think about it, the more I feel that basically level funding that surface lots with a small increase of 5 cents is going to move the people that really care into the surface lots. And a lot of folks from out of town are going to feel like it's either on par with where they're coming from and used to, or a bargain in some cases.
What I liked about that is it did say in there that they were, we could have an 85% vacancy rate if we upped our just a little bit, which would allow for more parking for people with a handicap sticker to pull in, or encouraging to have that, or not
Yeah.
85% occupancy rate.
Yeah.
My apologies.
And it's also like, I find, I'm lucky enough to live downtown, and but when I am driving into town, it's those moments where you really want to park in front of the bank because you're in a hurry.
Right.
You're willing to pay that extra, and it's not always. Normally, if I'm going to a restaurant or something, then I would park in a surface lot.
Because you thought it out and you, yeah.
So it's kind of interesting. It's not always across the board. There is not one typical person parking. I like staff recommendation. What is it?
4?
The 4th one.
I do too.
How about you,
Do you
Kate?
have any, well, I have a couple questions for Patrick.
Wing them out.
Wait a minute. Both the meters and the kiosks in the pay and display under this proposal would take coins, swipe a credit card and an app on a credit card.
Correct.
Correct. The operational costs, when you're talking about that, and I don't know if operational costs and convenience costs, are those the same thing?
Yeah.
Okay. Is that the credit card fee that somebody who swipes, swipes the card and uses the app with their credit card would have to pay? Is that what the convenience fee is?
So in everything that's presented, excuse me, here this evening, staff is recommending that the town incorporate the cost of those convenience factors into the pricing of parking.
Okay. Now, can I stop for one
Sure.
second? Is the convenience factor itself the cost of the consumer either swiping their card, credit card, or using the app, the credit card with their app? Is that what the convenience fee is? Is it the fee on the credit card use? Do you see what I'm saying?
It is the fee that the town would incur on the use of the credit card, on the communication between each of the meters and the kiosks and the banks.
Yeah.
And the maintenance of that system.
Okay, and
So-
that would be for both the meters, when somebody uses a credit card. If they use a credit card at a kiosk, this is swiping. If they swipe at a meter, if they swipe at a credit card, at a pay and display box, or if they use a credit card on an app on a meter or a credit card on an app at a box, there's a convenience fee that the town has to pay.
Correct.
Okay.
And that $50,000 is encompassing of all of that.
Okay.
And it would be passed on to anybody, even if you're using a quarter, because the rate would raise across, it would just be a flat rate.
Correct.
Okay.
And
I just want to make sure everybody
Yeah.
understands what the convenience fee is. I want to make sure I understand
everybody
on
will be
it.
paying it.
Yeah, and that it's on any kind of credit card use, whether you're using a meter, a kiosk, whether you're swiping or apping.
And
That's
and the
about-
and the experience the to the town,
Yeah.
it would make no difference.
Right, okay.
And to the public, it would make no difference because you're only paying for what it is you're purchasing. If you're
Right.
putting $1 on, you're paying $1, and that's it.
Okay, that's one of my questions. Okay, I think that was my major question. I just want to make sure we all understand what we're talking about. And at this point, the way it looks with the pricing, the big factor is the kiosks, because we're paying $165,000 to replace the 15 kiosks, and the meters themselves are $92,000. So that's
And I'd love to skip that, but those are the ones that are always
Right.
broken.
right. Yeah, and you did say,
Kiosks.
Yeah, kiosks,
Yeah.
Problems with the kids.
Yeah. Replacing those would be, I think, welcome.
A great idea.
what is the impact on the, the meter enforcement people? What is the impact on our town staff on whether we do, with all this change?
Sure. So in implementing the hardware, the meter heads or the kiosks, there'd be no noticeable change really whatsoever. The pay and display system would still work as the pay and display system works today. And, you would still need to go around and collect coinage on a regular basis from each of the meters, although that might be a little lighter. In terms of the use of the cell phone app at metered spaces, it would be no different. However, in the pay and display lots, using a cell phone parking app in a location that doesn't have numbered spaces will require parking enforcement to do a secondary search, right? So they come upon a vehicle and they take a look on the dashboard. If it's got a pay and display slip, great. They know, they proceed just as they ordinarily would. If there isn't a pay and display step, now they need to take a look and make sure that that license plate has secured a payment. So they'll be able to look on their cell phone, which is incidentally what parking enforcement uses today to issue tickets and whatnot. They'll be able to look on their cell phone and say, here's car ABC 123, it has paid, so they're good. That is not necessary if the spaces are numbered. However, we've avoided numbering spaces in our surface lots for a
Because of the
couple of
winter?
reasons. If we painted numbers in each of those spots, we'd very quickly find ourselves, I believe, with a need to be out there maintaining and
Yeah.
repainting and repainting.
You'd only see them 4 months out of the year.
Exactly. And they get covered with snow, and so we'd have that issue. And then secondly, if we were to sign them, and then we're talking about filling up all of our parking lots with, dozens and dozens and dozens of signs. So it seems like the intention here is to provide a parking system which is convenient for the public. If it's a second step for parking enforcement, particularly given a system which is comprehensive, we don't think it's going to be too much additional work. But it is a little bit of a
Right, but it's not a
extra
big,
step.
it's not a big hurdle, like we're not adding 3 hours more of people's time to do this. So
No,
perfect.
no,
I
we
assume if it
definitely
turned
wouldn't be
into a
adding any staff
mess-
time. It might be a second step
But
that
it's
someone
not.
needs to take on occasion if it's used in a surface lot.
And you would tell us if it became a mess, and then we would make other decisions if we needed to.
We put numbers.
I assume these are EMV compliant
EMV compliant.
for chip cards.
Oh,
So they can't just swipe. You have to be able to, so a chip
Yeah.
card is not going to allow you to swipe.
Okay.
A chip card has to be inserted
Okay.
or it will reject.
Okay,
And since everything is moving to EMV and has been for the last 2 years, that's going to be a really critical question. I would imagine the answer is yes, but we would want to do our due diligence and ask.
that's a good question.
okay.
It seems like it would be more efficient to have it be
Yeah.
designed that way.
Yeah, like you have to stick it in and
Yeah.
leave it in. The mag stripe is almost like just not even necessary.
Why was used like swap? That's
The
fine.
chips, that's more secure anyway.
Yeah.
And it's the only way it works. Once you have a chip, it will just fail if you try to swipe it,
Okay.
unless you manually punch it in the store system.
I have another question. The maintenance on the new meters and the kiosks, will that be more than we're dealing with now with the current maintenance on our current equipment?
A little bit. That's factored, by the way, into the $50,000.
Okay.
That's incorporated in there. There is an additional battery, which is required in each of the units. And so there's a component piece of that $50,000 is replacing those batteries on a rotation.
That makes sense.
Now, is there anything in, if we get these smart meters, is there an arrangement with the company if something like super goes bad, we get, a new one? Or what's the is there a maintenance agreement with the vendor or anything like that?
We would be buying brand-new equipment.
Okay.
And so I should probably know this. I believe there's a warranty period on them. The exact duration of that, I don't have at hand.
Okay, because right now, do I misunderstand this, that if there's something wrong with a meter, we can just snap it off and put a new head on?
Sure.
Okay.
Yep. So we would be doing the same thing that we do presently, which is, if there's a problem with this meter head, we don't take this meter head, we just swap the guts out and, we have some additional supplies. We would be doing the same thing here.
Okay. Okay, so there's no difference there.
Yep. So, the objective being to keep the whole system operational.
What is the current company's information security policy as far as data that's collected off debit cards, swipes, and use of the app?
There is a great answer to that I honestly can't recall. There was some technical name to that, something compliance.
I mean, I'm sure they know it. I'm just
Yep.
I'm just trying to think of everything I can.
Sure. I may have addressed that in the May 15th memo, but
Okay. You know what you may have? It sounds familiar. I think I might just need a refresher.
When you're ready, I have a question I bet you
Sure.
could answer.
Right away.
Oh, wait,
That
but I
was
have
a tough
another.
one.
Just
That was a
okay.
tough one. Will the new meters that also take coins
Yep.
take coins lesser than quarters?
Yes.
They will.
Yes.
That's really important.
That's very important to me.
It's important to me,
It wasn't
too.
even going to be a deal breaker for me, but it kind of annoys
I
me.
have a lot of nickels.
It's however you choose to set them up. So, we could decide, no, we want to do things only in increments of 25 cents, or if we wish to take nickels and dimes, we can choose to do that.
Yeah.
Not a problem.
Pennies? No. Sorry.
I believe the answer was all U.S. coinage. So
What? Even pennies?
I have a quick story about that.
whether or not we choose to take pennies is a...
My father used to hate paying the New Jersey Turnpike tolls so much. He then discovered once that you could pay in pennies. And this was 35 cents each one. It was cheaper back then. But he would throw in 35 cents, which he would carefully bundle each time.
I see you've inherited that.
And
Like
make
I just
everybody
see
wait.
that.
That was his minor protest against
Yeah, I'm
the
surprised.
New Jersey toll system. All right, quick story, sorry.
That's a good question. Did you have another question, Brandy?
No, I feel good. Like I just, if you could follow with me even offline, but probably best to do it online about information security and EMV compliance, that would be good.
Sure.
I mean, I love the idea of, I'm in favor of option 4, so I just want those two things.
Because I'm assuming, and maybe I shouldn't assume anything, but is if we use the same company to do everything, they must have an overall, like a policy for the credit cards when you,
Yeah. I mean, there's
Yeah.
some
Chip 'em,
standard that frankly
Apple.
I'm not
Right, they're probably
really
PCI
familiar with.
compliant, they're
They're
probably
really
all
proud
of
of it.
that.
You know, it's the latest something standard. I don't happen to
That's
be
PCI.
all
Yeah.
that familiar with that particular element,
Yep.
but I can forward that to you.
Yeah.
for sure.
That's easy. If you forward that to me, I can pull it out.
And we could make that part of the report. If you authorize that we move forward in the manner that's proposed tonight, we'd be coming back to you for the final approval of the procurement once it's all packaged, so.
And then if you make it part of the report, we can just share it out to the people. I think that'd be great.
okay, does anyone else, at this particular moment, does anyone else on the board have any questions? I'm going to swing
I
over
do
to the
not.
public. We can come back and ask after. I want to now
Le public.
see if anyone in the public has any questions or comments about the parking system. And yeah, and as Dick knows, what we ask is you tell us who you are and where you're from.
Dick DeGray. 2006, when I was my first year on the board,
That's a long time
we
ago.
purchased the parking meters that are existent now.
Great.
One of my biggest disappointments back then was not going to pay and display on Main Street. And I haven't heard anything here in this conversation about making Main Street pay and display and getting kiosks on Main Street and eliminating the parking meters that are always in terrible shape. They're bent over, which creates more work for Public Works. The reason they look halfway decent is because my wife and I, every year, go and paint the bottoms of those poles because no one else does it. And so here's an opportunity to say, you know what, we can get rid of these meters downtown and make more money from pay and display, which is evident that we do because, let's face it, you're taking your time with you. Sad to see that we're getting rid of the smart card because we worked really hard on building that up, and then to eliminate it, it took a long time to train local people to say, hey, here's a good way to use the parking system where you pay and then you get to take your time with you, and it has worked, I think, quite well. So that's disappointing, and I would hope you would talk a little bit about why you're not entertaining making 3/4 of Main Street pay and display, and Elliott Street, actually. Because you have meters that you haven't put in on Elliott Street where we've created the new parking down by the fire station. So I don't want to say anything, give out a secret, but there's free parking.
Yeah,
there.
and I like that, so I'm
You
gonna
know,
keep it that
That's
way.
free parking,
we talked
which is too bad. So I'd like you to talk about that briefly. When you talked about the rate increase, we always go to the lowest common denominator. We're afraid to do what we should do, and that is raise the rate to 15 cents, $1 an hour everywhere in town.
Good God.
We're so worried that people can't afford to park. Did I ever go to a town, or did you ever go to a town and say, boy, Northampton just raised their rate up. I'm not gonna get on there because the parking's too much. It's just, excuse me, asinine. So the recommendation was to raise the rate, not only on Main Street, but when you're low on funds, we should be raising the rate all over town. 5 cents, that's a joke. And what you should be doing with this is an ordinance that says every 5 years, we're going to review the parking rates. To go 15 years or 18 years without having a rate increase, show me the 2006 parking budget and show me this year's budget. And tell me what's the same in it.
I'm
I
down
mean,
with it.
really, the reality is you're going, oh, we don't want to do that, we don't want to offend anyone. No one's not going to come downtown because they've got to pay an extra 20 cents to park downtown for an hour. I mean, that's just absurd. I wonder what happens to us when we're thinking about that. You have to generate revenue for the system to do the repairs that you want to do. So let's do it right. I don't think we're going to have this mass exodus of people not coming to Brattleboro or locals not coming down because parking went up by 25 cents. I mean, really, I just think it's a sad commentary. But I really would like you to think about talking a little bit more about doing pay and display on Main Street. I mean, I really think getting as many as the heads out of there and the poles out of there, something I briefly talked about when you did the sidewalk. I'm not sure you were here, Peter, when the new sidewalk went in on the west side. Probably we should have talked about it, but it was so quick in coming that we didn't. But I think back then we wanted to do it, and we kept saying, oh, the cost, the operating cost, and we didn't. And I truly regret not putting those pay and display meters in on Main Street. So I know other people have things to say about it, but with the rate increase, I really think the whole town, it should be equal everywhere. And it certainly helps the revenue stream to the town, which is gravely needed. I mean, what'd you say, Patrick, $50,000?
Yes.
And that's going to go up every year, unless you're going to get it in a guaranteed contract, and I doubt that. Fees go up every year with credit cards.
Yeah.
So, and then I'll wait to see what's else.
Now, Patrick, do you want to address the pay and display on Main Street thing? Because we had a conversation about that. Remember, and how I would add signs, and that was a concern.
What I can say is what we brought back this evening is a plan for how to replace what we have with, new equipment that will help take credit cards. This is not a plan to come back and replace the meters on Main Street with pay and display. I understand that the town has considered that at some point in time. It was certainly before I got here. So that's prior to 2011. It may have been, I'm not sure entirely when it was. For reasons known to history and perhaps those who have sat in your chairs, the decision was made to keep the meters. And so, that has been the sort of basis of the plan that we've brought back to you this evening, to replace what we have with meters that will be able to process credit cards. I would like to say one thing, if you wouldn't mind, to the differentiated rate of parking. I understand that it can be attractive to think that why should it matter where I park, right? Parking should be the same over here as over there. There is some design intent behind the stepped rate of parking, such that the more desirable spaces, the spaces out on Main Street in front of everybody's shop, are the most expensive, and the longer term lots that we have, which are substantially less expensive, are designed to be able to support commuters, right? Folks who are coming in either from other parts of Brattleboro or other towns who are going to be there for 10 hours, and they're spending 30 cents an hour. And if you're going to be on Main Street, you're going to stop into, wherever for an hour or so, you're going to pay a considerably higher premium for that. And so it's a design feature that was praised, I would say, within the parking study, and I would recommend we adhere to that.
All right. Does anyone else in the public have any comments? Yes. Please come on up.
You're killing me. I have so many words.
And you won't hear your voice amplified, but it's for the TV. Can you get that?
My name is Robin Scudder,
Hi, Robin.
and I'm here partly on behalf of myself as a person with a disability, and partly on behalf of the ADA committee, which is the town's committee. And over the past, I've had a handicap placard for a long time, 20 years. Over time, my disability and my ability to get anywhere has deteriorated. So the handicap parking issue has become more and more of a concern. For years I've asked why there is no parking on Main Street, and I would pay $2 an hour, and I'm really tired of people telling me that I can park anywhere on Main Street, I don't have to pay. It's not about free parking, it's about parking. It turns out there's a very good reason we have no parking on Main Street, which is ADA requirements need a certain width to accommodate people in wheelchairs and other things, and for people to get out of their cars safely. So the town is not able to meet those requirements because our street's too narrow. And I share that because I think there are so many people who have no idea. People with handicap tags who think the town just doesn't care, and that's not true. So I've been going to ADA meetings since February, and the topic has been much discussed. And I am authorized to speak on behalf of the committee for some issues, but some issues are also my personal observations. We feel as a committee that there are probably cooperative and creative ways to provide parking on Main Street for people with disabilities in a way that's helpful for everyone. It's helpful for merchants, it's helpful for people who go downtown, and it's not an expensive or outrageous kind of compromise, and we've talked this over. I was inspired on Valentine's Day after a meeting, driving down Main Street to see 2 meters in front of Windham flowers with balloons all over them, saying reserved, so you could get your flowers. I thought, what a great idea. And then over the winter, also the Winter Farmers Market made known to people with handicap tags that during the actual time of the market, when their loading zones were not being used, you could park there, and then either they would bring you out a tag if you called them, or you could go in and get the tag and put it on your car. And that was enormously useful. And there are a huge number of people with tags who are able to use a regular space because we don't have a wheelchair, we don't have a transport, whatever. That there might be a way to work with the downtown merchants. One of the ideas we came up with was that perhaps downtown merchants would sponsor meters on a daily basis. It's not very much to rent a meter space for a day, and it wouldn't be a huge number, maybe one on each side of the street. And there would be special hoods that would be through advertising and public information campaigns known to be for handicapped people. And that would allow a little more parking. I think what I would really like people to know, and this stunned even me, there are, let's see, just let me drop my paper. In the town of Brattleboro itself, 1,542 people who have handicap tags or plates.
Wow.
That's more than 1 in 8. And then if you add in some statistics we couldn't get. So we don't have Vernon and we can't do New Hampshire, so there's no Hinsdale, Chesterfield. But if you add in Newfane, Putney, Townsend, Westover, Wilmington, and Marlborough, there are 955 more. And I would also say that for people who have tags, some of those are probably not being used and the state doesn't purge them. But some of them are being used by more than one person. In my family, I officially have a tag. My husband has cancer, and at various points in his treatment, he's very healthy and able to walk now, but he gets tired. I've had to transport him and use the tag. I regularly take my mother, who's 81, who has some mobility issues and vision problems. So my tag gets used for 3 people. So I think it's fair to say there are nearly 2,500 people in this radius of Brattleboro who need handicap parking. And if the three reasons, as pointed out by the parking study, for coming downtown are dining, shopping, and entertainment, I, for one, would like to say, I almost cry every time there's something wonderful at the Latches, because it's going to be a real exercise to get there. Someone's going to have to drop me off at an unsafe place and then drive somewhere else. In terms of Stephanie and the Brattleboro Downtown Alliance, the market is a huge untapped market for downtown Brattleboro. You talked about tourists being able to go in and shop. People who live here would like to go eat. There are currently 17 places in downtown Brattleboro to eat. And for 16 of them, the closest place to park is Harmony, where there are 4 spaces. Then the next closest places are High Street, which is absurd. Unless I want a tattoo,
no.
I'm not parking at High Street. I can't go down that hill, and I certainly can't come back up. And if I have a wheelchair, no one can push me or hold me back. So those spaces are basically, and then there are 12 spaces in the parking garage. But the analogy I'd like to make, when you think about how many people are using handicap parking, if you went to Price Chopper, where they have about 14 spaces, they're almost always all filled because people use them. There are people out there going out shopping, getting out of their cars, going into a store. Walking from Harmony to Twin Flames or Beadniks, where I haven't been able to go for 4 or 5 years, is the equivalent of asking me to park at Walgreens and cross the street, hoping that I can get across fast enough to shop and then to get my stuff that I buy back to Walgreens. Asking me to go to the parking garage and do the same thing is the equivalent of asking me to park at the high school. I certainly can't take my 81-year-old mother and, you know, the two of us toddle over to Price Chopper. I went down, yesterday I drove around downtown to all the spaces I could think of, and was mildly surprised to find that only 2 handicap spaces were being used. And it was about 1 o'clock, so I thought it might be around lunchtime. The 2 spaces that were being used were the 2 behind the works. And the reason for that is a place you can get out of the car and you can access Vermont Artisan Design. You can go to the works, you can get to Duo, you can get to the Tulip. To get across the street is an entirely different matter. The 2 spaces that weren't near there were not being used, and not a single space in the parking garage was used, and nothing on High Grove was used. And that's because they don't work. And I realized part of the reason that handicapped shoppers are invisible is because, like me, we go downtown and we have other places we can find a parking space that are closer. I'm not going to park, I'm not going to park in Harmony at a different place if I want to go to Hotel Pharmacy. Also, I'm not going to go downtown a lot of times if there's traffic. My mother always says, let's go to Walmart, there's parking. When my friends say, let's go out to eat, we say, where's accessible, where will have parking? The 99 has 5 spots in front of their restaurant. They're always full. And if you go in there and sit and eat, during the course of your meal, you'll see many people with canes, walkers, wheelchairs, because they go there not because they don't want to go downtown, but they just can't. So I think that's probably pretty much it. Earlier this year, Brandy online started a discussion about eye contact on Main Street, which morphed into a discussion of benches, where people started to bring up that there's not many places on Main Street to sit. And my mother immediately said, I can tell you where they are, because she lives downtown and walks to the library. She said, there's the bus stop, but that's not my side of the street. There's the River Garden, And there's one other place where sometimes she can get a seat for a minute.
Key Bank, maybe.
Key Bank, and maybe Amy's if it's not busy.
Maybe Amy's, yeah.
So, and my final thing is, when there's an event downtown, several weeks ago there was a protest on the Common about immigrant children. More than 500 people were there. When we started up Main Street, people were parking as far down as Brown and Roberts and going to the event. There is not a single handicap parking space on that end of town, not even at the tourist information booth. So that would be a place where I would love for the committee and other people to explore the possibility of working with merchants. Another place would be the co-op, which I think has all kinds of crazy reasons why, if I were them, I wouldn't want people parking there. But since they close at 8, by 8:30 most of their parking is empty. They might be open, it would be worth asking, to opening the first little line of spaces, the beginning of the parking lot, for handicap parking for people who want to go to the 9 o'clock movie, because by then all the parking's gone.
Right on, yeah.
Anyway, there are a lot of creative ideas, and my one hope is that whatever the town does or thinks about doing, they ask someone from the ADA committee to come and be part of that discussion. There's a list on here of 8 or 10 stakeholders in this parking discussion, people who were interviewed. The handicap community was not on that list. And we're talking about 2,500 people who could be eating downtown.
Can I ask you one question?
Sure.
When you're saying about the metered spaces on Main Street, and there needs to be bigger spaces because if people are, if you need to use a wheelchair,
Right.
where would you put
You can't.
well, and I think you were saying if the merchants bag the meters for a day or something,
There are huge numbers of people like me.
right?
I have walking poles. My mother has a cane.
Yeah.
There are people who have oxygen tanks.
Right,
There are
but-
people who have heart conditions who can't walk very far.
Because my question was if you needed a space downtown that was be able to get people in and out for a wheelchair, what would your recommendation be because of the curb?
I'm glad you brought that up, because
Yeah.
that's the one thing I forgot, and we did talk about it.
Yeah.
If you had a place on each side of Main Street, on the east side, either down by the light at High Street, I mean at Elliott Street, and on the west side, just when you come around the corner from High Street. And it was a crosshatched space that was only for loading and unloading.
Yep.
And there would be a time limit, and you would have to stay with your car. You couldn't just run off
Yeah.
unless your person really, really needed assistance.
Yeah.
Also, in a perfect world, there would be a bench so that when you left, the person could sit there and wait for you, and you could go park, and then you could come back.
Because I'm assuming you need you couldn't have people going up and over a curb, so it would have to be where there was
You'd
like
need a cutout.
right.
And you would
Okay.
need it to be in a space that had nothing behind it, so you
Right.
could get something out of the trunk.
Okay.
So on the east side, that's down by Burroughs, or it's where the clock is, where the fire hydrant
Yeah.
is. And,
Okay.
you know, just hope you don't have
Okay.
a fire.
Okay, that was my question. That's very helpful.
So
Yeah.
anyway, and I know I talked a lot, but this has been on my mind for, as
Yeah,
Brandy
no.
knows, several years, as Dick can tell you. I've been
This was
working
really
at
good,
Xerox
Robin.
for
Yeah.
centuries.
No,
Really,
thank you.
really good, Robin. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Does that fall more into our second part of the discussion?
I think it does.
I think
Okay.
so too. I'm really glad that you
Yeah.
brought that up the way you
That's our
did.
second.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have anything they'd like to say? Comments, questions about the parking discussion that we're having right now? Stephanie.
Hi, Stephanie Bonin from Downtown Brattleboro Alliance. I would want
Oops.
to just know the reasoning on the company that you're recommending for the app, because we're sandwiched in between Keene and Greenfield. I'm curious of why we're not choosing an app that both Keene has. Greenfield has Passport and Keene has Park Mobile, and so I'm curious of why not to take advantage of what they're already using. People will have it on their phones.
Oh, you want to, Patrick?
So that's certainly an option available. It's certainly also not staff's recommendation. The idea not being so much to capitalize on what other nearby towns are doing, but in order to be able to synthesize reporting. It would make sense, at least from an operational standpoint. I understand that it may not be quite so important to everybody else, but from an operational standpoint, it would make reporting seamless and easier.
Do the other two apps not have those same benefits?
It would be a process of compiling data from two different systems, right? So, how much did we sell? Well, we go through one process to determine, revenues by one method, and we go through another process to determine revenues by another method. By utilizing the parking app that is available through the IPS group, you could, the reporting would be integrated. So.
And one more clarification, because the kiosks are definitely IBS.
Yeah.
They can't be the Park Mobile company or the Passport company. They don't offer kiosk technology.
Is that a question or?
It's a question.
Okay, I don't know if they do. The staff's recommendation is to piggyback on a procurement that was performed nationally, and IPS was awarded a contract based on. And
Gotcha.
the recommendation would be to utilize that procurement and to replenish our equipment with that. There are certainly other avenues we could go down. Staff's recommendation is that we piggyback on this procurement and make this purchase.
I think Peter wants
Thank
to
you.
add something.
Yeah, I'd like to just amplify the reason why we think that it's important to use this particular procurement that actually happened down in Texas, but it's been used by communities around the country, is because in the initial research that Patrick did back in April and May on this, it was clear that those communities that had written up their own RFPs, that basically started from scratch and done their own procurement for these systems, were in many cases not happy with the results because they were starting from scratch on a system that's very complicated. But the communities that had implemented this system from the procurement that had been done in Texas, including some in Vermont, had reported successful outcomes, and it appeared to be something where we could be surer that with this kind of investment of close to $300,000 that we could be optimistic of a successful outcome with this particular product.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions or comments about our parking payment options, whatever it is?
The board had a little bit to add on
Oh,
to
yeah,
the comment.
then we'll
Is this the time?
This is our chance, everybody in the public.
I just wanted to address a couple of things that Dick brought up. I totally agree that review of parking rates every 5 years or something built in.
I do too.
It's a great idea.
Yes.
Costs keep going up everywhere. I think, I do feel that there is a good reason to keep the surface lots cheaper. And because a lot of people rely on a competitively priced area versus getting more value out of the Main Street should be, I think, the premium spots
The
in our
convenience, you
town.
pay for the convenience, and therefore you get the convenience.
Yep. And I talked to Dick earlier a couple weeks ago about the idea of pay and display on the streets. And I have to admit that I personally never like them.
I don't
And that's just
either.
my thing. And so it's,
Yeah.
I think I could probably find, if you find me 5 people that like the idea of pay and display, I bet I could find 10 that don't like the idea. I could be wrong about that. But to me, it's kind of nice and it feels homier to be able to park, get out of your car and see 1 of 2 meters where you're going to feed. And speaking of being cheap, I don't know if anybody else does that. You look at the meter to see if it still has some time left on it.
I don't do it because I'm cheap. I do it because I feel like I want to get
Yeah.
lucky.
Right, exactly.
But I'm like, oh my God.
And then there is the additional matter of, okay, now where is the kiosk? How do you number the spaces? And that
Yeah.
kind of thing. So it just feels a little more like Brattleboro's tradition to have those. But certainly I don't feel like you should be painting our...
Yeah, so I agree with Tim. And I think we need to be studying the parking every 5 years. That needs to really happen, the way that technology moves and costs move and parking lot needs move. In the same vein as why I think it's a convenience to have a little extra money paid on Main Street for that same exact reason. I'm not in favor of kiosks, because if they're like, it's a convenience to be able to pay where you park.
Right.
So it's a convenience to park on Main Street, therefore you pay a little more, and part of that convenience is you can pay exactly where your car is. And I also think that there is a reason not to just raise rates for everybody, because there are people that use the lots for 8 hours a day. There are people that are parking there. When I worked at the Commons, I had to park in that parking lot. And for some people, it's easy to whip out extra quarters, and frankly, for others, it's not. So we should have a part of town where it costs a little less to park. And that makes perfect sense to me. A flat rate would not, or a flat raise would not.
Yeah, and just to add one more thing, I think, not this time, not in this session, but I really think we should also put on the table, should Sundays be free?
Yes. People
Well,
get excited about that.
Okay, so.
I mean, not
think-
yes, put it on the table. I mean,
know
yes, it should
Chamber
be
of Commerce
free.
is gonna
The
come
Sunday
after
should
me
be
with
free.
pitchforks.
What?
But what happens is people go and they park at, when do the meters end on a Saturday, Dick?
6 o'clock?
6 o'clock. They'll go and park on Main Street.
So then what if we bifurcate it and parking on Sundays on Main Street isn't free, but in High Grove and Park
Right,
it
oh, I'm
is,
talking about
you know?
Main Street
Yeah.
parking.
You can't park overnight on Main Street.
I think he means they're parking for the day. They're like, woohoo, I'm on Main Street, and they're all day.
At 6
You
o'clock.
can't park overnight on Main Street?
I don't think you,
No.
wait, even in the summertime, I don't think you can.
But you can in Harmony, couldn't
Plus,
you?
the whole town shuts down at 9. Why are you
Parking
parking
lots.
overnight?
Okay.
Overnight.
I was
unless there's a
confusing
snowstorm.
lots with,
Yeah.
Main Street,
Cannot.
you cannot park overnight, although there are several
Yeah.
I see every morning that come out and park, but
Well, I'm not
if
making
they're
that-
fortunate, they get ticketed.
I'm not making that as a proposal. I'm just saying that I know, because I see a lot of folks from out of town about to feed it on a Sunday. Sometimes I stop them just to be
Me
nice.
too, yeah.
But that must be pretty common in the
Yeah.
outside world.
We could talk about that.
Not this time, but.
Not today, but we could talk about it, yeah.
Dick, do you want to add something?
Yeah, just, when you're talking about these rates, the Harmony lot is the most popular lot. Why, I mean, not to raise that up raise that up to 25 cents for 15 minutes. If you want to leave something free, leave Harris lot. It's the most underutilized lot. Leave the rate the same there. These other lots, the High Grove lot, raise them up where there's more utilization, and then say, okay, we got to get people to the Harris lot, which nobody knows about. The tourists don't know about. We haven't done a very good job directing people to some of our parking places. And as for what you said, we are not supposed to be feeding the meters all day. There's something in the ordinance that says, bingo, if you park here for X number of time, and the parking attendant says, hey, this guy's feeding the meter, they give you a ticket. So we want to discourage that and say, you need to get a parking pass. I mean, that's what we should be encouraging, to have the people downtown. And you're right on. I have said we should have paying for parking on Sunday. People that live downtown or work downtown utilize the best spaces come 6 o'clock on Saturday night, and they don't have to move until 9 o'clock on Sunday morning. And they park and they stay there, and they hurt business, yet business goes, we don't want to have to pay for parking. I think it's something that you should really strongly consider, just because it makes spaces available for people who want to come down and shop. And if you have a parking pass already, you're going to utilize your parking. But the people that don't, they just say, I can get in the Harmony lot at Friday and I'm good. I don't have to even move my car. So, or on Saturday, excuse me.
Saturday.
So, but I would revisit this rate increase because, don't raise the rate by 5 cents in Harris Law. I mean, to me, that really is laughable, 5 cents. In 15 years, 5 cents? Come on. You can't even buy double bubble gum for 5 cents. And I used to buy it for 2 for a penny. So I think you should not make a snap decision and think about that and say, you know what, let's try to get people to the Harris lot. If we want to do something for the townspeople, let's get them over to that lot. We won't even make a rate increase there. The most underutilized lot in town.
So my only rebuttal to that is I worked at BSNL for 10 years and our parking pass is in Harris lot. And day after day, if I had to leave in the middle of the day, I would have to go park at High Grove lot because at least during business hours, that lot was completely full. Now, whether or not we need better signage to drive people there so they can be enjoying evenings downtown and parking in Harris lot is a different conversation, but during the daytime, I speak from personal experience that sometimes I didn't even bother trying to go back because it was so full.
Although I think bigger picture, I think Dick makes a good point about looking at each lot and maybe.
Well, and we're supposed to be looking at like the co-op lot and other private lots anyways.
Right.
So it should just all be part of that.
I think the 5 cents, honestly, because I made a reference to it being quite minimal as an increase, especially after 15 years or whatever. But it does offset sort of public perception of us raising that Main Street up a quarter, which is pretty significant. I mean, this is something we should be looking at on a regular basis, not
Right.
once every 15 years.
I agree, but
Yeah.
I know you people get out of town. I swear I've seen you in other towns. And what do you pay for parking when you go to town?
Right, but that's the other town and this is this town.
I have an
You're
info.
paying
I don't-
25 cents, most places are 25 cents for 15 minutes.
Yeah, but that's other
And
places.
we're afraid to do that, and we're a tourist-driven town, plain and simple. So that's all I'm gonna say.
All right, good.
Ball is in your court.
Yeah. What Peter just said to me is what they can do, we can decide to move ahead with how we want to move ahead, but they can bring to us an alternative rate structure for the next meeting. You know what I mean? If we want to.
If you were to determine tonight, and what I think I'm hearing as a consensus is that the recommendation of staff would be the minimum increase. And so if you were to agree that that's the minimum increase, then we know that the financing package that we've described to you there would be sufficient funds, right, to provide the additional operating revenue. And then what we could do, because we're not going to bring an ordinance to the next meeting, we're going to have a broader discussion of parking. And there may be other changes to the parking ordinance that need to be incorporated into the ordinance that will ultimately be brought to you for this rate action and perhaps other parking actions. So during the discussion 2 weeks from tonight about other parking issues, we could show you an alternative or two of additional ways to think about this potential rate increase, using this proposed increase tonight as the floor. And then looking, we could also do this, we could also do that based on some of the ideas that have been shared tonight.
You guys
I think
think?
it's an excellent idea, because I think
I
even
think it's
in the
excellent, and
Harris
I'm down
lot,
with it.
5-cent increase is okay.
Great.
Okay.
So we'll look forward to seeing that.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if people want to talk about, I am fine doing everything.
Me too.
Meters and kiosks,
Yep.
app, coin, debit, no, not debit, well, chip.
It feels
Swipe.
best to me to offer as many options as we can for people that want to park.
Right.
Whatever you have in your car, whether it be a coin or a credit card or whatever.
Do we know timing? Any kind of
Tomorrow.
estimates
Estimates
of
of,
rollout? Do we have any?
yeah.
Sure. It depends a little bit on how quickly we make some of these decisions and move forward. An ordinance change, correct me if I'm wrong, Jan, takes a minimum of 90 days? Is that
2 meetings plus 60.
2 meetings plus 60, so that's 90 days.
Yeah.
And that's equivalent to the lead time needed on the equipment as well. So,
Great.
And the ordinance change would be the rates.
Yep.
Correct?
Correct.
So we could discuss, as if we do it which it looks like we're going to do, as Peter just suggested, do at the floor rates, which would be the ones that were proposed here, but they'd come back and give us alternatives to increase the rates even beyond the 5 cents in the dollar. So we have plenty of time to figure that out.
The rates on the surface lot.
Yes.
I think is what we're.
It was
Yeah,
just a
we're talking
proposal.
about, yeah. And then the equipment would start rolling, we'd start figuring that out. And when would something like
Yeah,
that
that's
be
what I was curious
installed?
about.
So the timing of an ordinance is about 90 days, and the
Right.
lead time on the purchase of the equipment is 90 days. So the exact number of days after 90 days before everything's, up and operational,
I say 3
I've been told the
weeks.
lead time's 90 days and installation would happen shortly thereafter.
And based on the additional discussion you're going to have 2 weeks from tonight about other parking matters that might end up getting incorporated into that ordinance, I think realistically, you're looking at one of the 2 September meetings to consider the ordinance. It's a first and a second reading, and then the advertising requirements. So it's going to be deep in the winter.
Yeah.
It might-
Christmas.
Yeah, or early in the
Ish.
new year.
Now,
It'll give us something exciting.
when you say
January.
Christmas, does that mean, when would the meters and new kiosks actually be put in the ground?
Not
So
being frozen.
I would recommend that we
Can we just snap that?
get the ordinance process underway so we know that we're going to have the rate increase ahead of the installation of the equipment.
Right.
But the time distance after the ordinance goes into effect doesn't need to be long. So just as long as the one happens ahead of the second.
Right, but you can install kiosks and meters, and then we could change the rates at any time we want it. So we are not holding back installing new meters and kiosks until we get a rate, right?
Right.
So
That's what I'm asking.
So the lead time is the same for each, and I would recommend that we change the rate prior to initiating the new equipment, with the idea being that we don't incur the additional cost of operating the equipment until such time as we've got the additional revenue to offset it.
Okay. So are you saying, when like Christmas or the holiday season is when like the gift of the new meters and kiosks happen in our town?
Also the gift of the rate increase.
That's very aggressive. I think.
I'm just trying to figure out what we're.
So realistically, I think the way we should talk about it is early in 2019.
Okay, good.
You're already trying to
Because
market this, I see.
it's
Trying to figure it out.
hitting
I see
that
the campaign.
holiday season target is going to be tough. And then I think there's also probably pros and cons, even from among the people in the room, say nothing of the community, as to whether a rate increase at that time is better or a rate increase in January.
Well, that's what I'm trying to figure out, like, because if, we need to make sure that everybody understands what's happening, and to throw
Right.
up some new meters in a kiosk right now, we don't want people to freak out and not understand.
And we shouldn't raise rates
Right.
before we have new meters.
Well, that's it,
So the way,
So we're on the same page.
yes, I think we are. And the way I think it would flow forward is you're going to 2 weeks from tonight have another discussion of parking, dealing with some other matters, related but different from what we're talking about tonight. And we move on from there, depending on what direction we've received from you, to either very quickly put together an ordinance and some other actions, or to bring you additional information that you need to consider before you make those decisions. But when you've made them, then there's going to be a lag time of about 90 days before everything gets implemented. So
Yeah.
we're looking at likely early in the new year.
Okay, so tonight we can approve whatever we want to approve, the meters, kiosks, the rate increase, well, doing some kind of rate increase, but it has to be in an ordinance.
Yes. We had 4 actions we were proposing to you this
Yes.
evening.
Can I ask Tim a question?
If got the chairs,
Yeah,
just want to make sure it's,
yeah, I know the protocol. I was here before.
I'm sorry,
Yes,
we're
sir.
just strategizing.
Tim made a comment to you, Kate.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't we raise the rates before we got the new equipment? It's a separate issue altogether. Rates are rates,
Oh, yeah.
and
It's
the
just,
equipment is the equipment,
know-
and revenue's revenue.
Right, we're just having a
Oh.
conversation.
Right, but we can,
because when you see a new meter, you feel a little better about paying more for it.
Right.
I do.
but we still.
Hey, why am I paying more for this
Right,
whole?
but
For
it's
this
still gonna-
junky old meter.
But it's still going to take 90 days in order to raise a rate.
It is,
not a big
and there's another issue, and I don't know whether this is a big deal or whether it's just one more thing, but there's reprogramming. So what you don't want to do, since we're going to make a wholesale change, I don't think you want to put the new equipment in and then all but immediately have to reprogram it to a higher rate, nor do you want to reprogram the existing system and then install the new equipment. There's an extra step involved either way, and I don't know what that burden is, but it's not nothing to have to reprogram all the individual units.
And on Main Street,
That's correct.
It's gonna be.
And I'm sorry if this level of, specificity as to how these things literally on a day-to-day basis would get rolled out is, what we were focused with this particular memo is procurement, rates. We would be coming back with details, real details in terms of, in this week we're expecting this to happen, and this week we're expecting this to happen. That this was really written with the idea of let's choose a course, a direction to head towards.
Okay. So tonight, if we all agree, what conceivably we want to do is, authorize the meters and the kiosks, incorporate the cost of the credit card and debit cards into the transaction fees, direct the town staff to plan for an intra-fund loan between utility and parking, and then work on the ordinance for the revised rates.
Great.
And just a quick clarification on that last one, that is what we asked you to do, but based on the conversation tonight, we would expect that we wouldn't actually be, we'll begin to work on that, but we won't be bringing you an ordinance for consideration next time.
Okay.
Because that ordinance might take a different shape once you've given consideration to additional alternatives for how much the rates might go up.
Right.
And to the other issues you're going to talk about next time.
So should we strike that or revise verbiage?
I was suggesting that we put in minimum manner approved instead of just manner approved
Yeah.
And, oh,
for the actual.
that's in the third,
No,
right?
this one
For
right
the
here.
actual
Aha, okay.
Just
Yes,
an idea.
thank you. Thank you. Yeah, sure. With that change, actually, I think
Oh, I see,
you could
yeah.
do all four
Okay.
actions this evening.
Is anybody ready to do anything?
Yeah. You want to make a
Rock
motion?
and
or
roll.
want me to?
Yeah. There's four, so people can.
I'll make a motion to authorize staff to obtain new smart parking meters and kiosks using the procurement performed by the Region 14 Education Service Center of Abilene, Texas, in coordination with the National Cooperative Purchasing Alliance.
We have a motion to authorize staff to obtain new smart parking meters and kiosks. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Motion carries 3-0.
I will make a motion to incorporate the cost of credit and debit card transactions into the price of parking.
We have a motion to incorporate the cost of credit and debit card transactions into the price of parking. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Motion carries 3-0.
And I'll make a motion to direct town staff to propose a plan for an interfund loan of $275,000 from the utility fund to the parking fund to cover the upfront costs of a transition to a smart parking system.
We have a motion to direct town staff to propose a plan for the interfund loan of $27,000 from the utility fund to the parking fund. Oh, I'm sorry, $275,000. It'd be great if it was only $27,000. $275,000. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Oh, yes.
Or you're not going to win.
The utilities budget is where you're going to take this money from?
Yes.
How much money is actually sitting in the surplus of the utilities fund budget where you can just go and take $275,000 out? The reason I raise this is that for several years, I have said that the rates for water and sewer are going up exponentially higher, and we are doing much better on our pro forma, and so therefore we should be reducing those rates to make it more affordable for the users in Brattleboro. And here we are, we're going to give the parking fund a $275,000 loan.
So the board thoroughly examined that back when they were looking at the utility fund budget back in the spring, and considered whether or not to amend the ordinance. We're in the final year of the 5-year ordinance that was approved previously, and decided not to change the terms right now, but we explored here, and we know that it'll be subject to additional modeling that'll be done between now and next spring when the new ordinance is actually considered. But the possibility that rates may be very much stabilized in the next ordinance. So there's going to be the consideration of what parts of the model have performed better than expected and what parts of haven't, and how that relates to the fact that in the last period of time, it was the sewer fund, the sewer portion of the fund that needed the funding for the major improvements that were being paid out over time at the sewage treatment plant and elsewhere in the system. And in the next cycle, it's going to be the water system that's going to need more attention, including actually rebuilding or replacing the water treatment plant. So based on all those different factors, that will be examined again when the utility fund budget is put together for next year. In the meantime, right now, the fund balance there is over $4 million. And we believe that it's a prudent way to manage this particular expense, rather than going out into the market and having to pay interest to some other party, to take $275,000 from a greater than $4 million balance to accelerate the pace of the improvements for the parking fund, where the interest that's going to be paid will be paid from one enterprise fund of the town, the parking fund, to the other enterprise fund of the town, the utility fund. It won't be a burden to the taxpayers, and it'll be a way in which the interest cost to the parking fund will actually keep the utility fund whole.
Is this an interest-free loan?
No, sir. It'll be a market rate based on, we've recently borrowed money, as you know, for the half of the cost of the fire aerial ladder truck, and our intent was to apply that rate to this loan, to being borrowed in the same approximate time period for actually a shorter period of time.
Thank you.
Okay, we have motion to direct town staff to propose a plan for an interfund loan of $275,000 from the utility fund to the parking fund. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Motion carries 3-0.
Tim, where did you want the word minimum? Did you want it before the word rates? Or
I put it before the word manner.
Great, let me just go ahead and do that. I make a motion to direct staff to prepare a parking ordinance to revise rates in the minimum manner approved by the select board at this meeting.
We have a motion to direct town staff to prepare a parking ordinance to revise rates in the minimum manner approved by the select board at this meeting. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Motion carries 3-0.
Excellent.
Thank you. And before you go, Brandy, thank you, everybody. We're gonna have the next.
Thank you for weighing in, everybody.
Yeah,
who
and on the
spoke.
21st, we're going to have another discussion. And Peter, do you want to tell us what's the parking discussion on the 21st will include?
Sure. So there's improvements. We actually, this evening, we had the stairway improvements to the transportation center that were also here. And there was no particular action you needed to take on those, except that we wanted you to stop us if we're heading in a direction you don't want us to go in. Our intent is to pursue bidding on replacing the one flight that has been closed because it's in bad condition, because that's what we think we're going to have sufficient funds for this year. And then to plan tentatively that in each of the next couple of years we'll do the additional flights, so that over a 3-year period the entire west stairway would be, 4-year period, the entire west stairway would be replaced. So we'll continue on that path unless you direct us otherwise. And then the other matter for this evening was
Bike parking.
bike parking. Thank you.
And the parklet.
We're going to install the parklet together with the DBA down at the
People are excited about that.
intersection of Elliott Street and Main Street. And again, that's not something that needs further action by the board. We'll just continue on that path. What we will be discussing a couple of weeks from tonight are some broader issues regarding the parking ordinance and things that came out of the parking plan and the shared parking that you brought up earlier this evening, the potential for private enterprise to share, one entity's lot that is used for certain purposes during the day might be used by a different entity during the evening.
Right.
That's what we're talking about.
There's, some options related to that we can be looking at, I think, more over the longer haul probably than over the short term, but there's some things nevertheless for you to consider. There are some other concerns that have been raised by either members of the community or members of the board.
That's right.
Related to certain other aspects of the parking regulations in town and the parking ordinance. And so the purpose of the discussion 2 weeks from now is to get any further direction from you on things that you want to take a deeper dive into. It'll be more taking that broad scan across the parking system to see if there's additional issues that you need further information from staff on.
Great. So everybody can put it down. Yeah, Stephanie.
Just clear, the next meeting would be the time to propose other issues that you want to look at, that you want to.
Yes.
That's the 21st.
On the 21st.
Yep.
But if you think of them in advance, let us know.
Yep.
So you don't want to know right now?
Oh, if you want to tell us right now.
Okay, so it's just public safety around lots and the parking garage.
Okay.
So making our public, so we're talking about repairing the stairs over a 3-year, and that has been the major discussion around the transportation center. And there is a much larger discussion to be had to make that parking garage transportation center a access point to our town that we're proud of and we're excited about. And then there's public safety issues in all lots and in all garages that need to fit in.
Yep.
And then also looking at our bond being paid off before that bond is paid off and before that money is already spent, which we've spent it to some degree, how can we earmark it so that we're constantly able to have dollars around public safety? And I don't know if earmark is the right term right there, but
know what you mean.
a discussion around that so it doesn't get lost into
Right.
operating funds.
And lighting and things like paint, specifically like painting, transportation center, lighting, all of that is definitely part of the conversation.
Yes,
Great.
absolutely.
Just so you know.
Okay, great,
Yeah.
thanks.
Okay, so more parking or more parking-like things. Okay, there we go. All right, thanks, everybody. So we'll continue parking on the 21st. The only reason Brandy and I are talking is because we want to get, we're going to go back to Cassandra because you are here.
Yes.
And what we need is a motion to convene as liquor commissioners.
So moved.
We have a motion to convene as liquor commissioners. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Motion carries 3-0. We're liquor commissioners.
Sorry.
She's coming right back.
the majority of that pitcher of water.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, boy. Oh. Different from what we-
Yeah, that'd be great.
No addition, if we had more copies, but in that primer, it references this group, and there's a link in that primer to this document. There's a URL. This is from the CDC, it's like alcohol outlet density guide.
Okay,
So we
we're
can share
ready.
that.
We are ready.
So I had asked Peter and Jan if we could also just talk about a primer for planning with, it's just basically how to include substance abuse prevention in town plans as well as municipality policies and also just actions. And so we'll start with the compliance piece and then we can move to that. So what I can provide to you today is just kind of looking back to October of last year into May of this year, what the DLC has done as far as compliance checks. And fortunately, only 2, which I know you've already addressed, because I think, when did you guys pass was it probably February or something, right? When you guys did the most recent liquor licensing renewals? Do you
A while
remember?
ago.
Yeah, it was a while, yeah. But I remember that the 2 that were brought up, which are on here, they came in and talked with you. So I'm really happy to see how many compliance checks were done by the DLC. which hasn't been the case in most years, especially around alcohol compliance checks. And it's great that out of 31 compliance checks, only 2 failed. And then I wanted to just also, if you're looking on the alcohol side, I'm noticing that we have two-sided here. Of the liquor control trainings, I will say that we used to have about 40 or 50 come. Now it's been about 10 to 15 since they started charging $25 per staff person to come to those trainings, which is really unfortunate because they've shown to be the most effective in compliance, in successful compliance when they actually are in person with the Department of Liquor Control. We were providing free trainings. We did 2 pilots, and they were really well received by the 2 businesses that we work with, which is Whetstone Brewery with David Heiler and his staff, and Anita Grant, who owns or had owned the 2 mobile stations, which one is now no longer in existence, which was the one next to the Dunkin' Donuts on Canal Street. But she does also own the mobile station at the Rotary at Exit 3. And that was really great because it was really focused on the staff and a lot of time just kind of role playing how to deal with, people that may be belligerent or, how to look at IDs, and they found that was really helpful.
Can I interject one
Yeah.
thing? Because I think there's some confusion sometimes. The
Okay.
compliance checks that you are talking about
Yeah.
are the Department of Liquor
This
Control.
is all Department of Liquor Control.
Okay.
Yeah, this is
Yeah,
us.
yeah.
But I'm just letting you know that we are planning, we did plan that. Unfortunately, the person who used to be the Department of Liquor Control trainer who was doing the responsible retailer with us he actually had a heart attack and going to Alaska about 5 months ago, and it's about 4 months ago, and he had to have open heart surgery. So it's a big deal. So he's hoping to get back in the fall, but it's just been let him take care of himself and heal. But one of the things that we can realize is, wow, we were depending on this one person. So what happens if that one person can't do it? The other thing that's been a challenge with our compliance checks is that we haven't been able to get young people. We're hoping to work with an agency to get young people in, and they haven't been able to find the right people. So our committee, which includes again Anita and David and Steve, the Department of Liquor Control, Robin Risky from the Department of Health, we're going to try to figure out how to kind of deal with some of these challenges. That said, we definitely work still with the retailers. But I will say that there are quite a few that attended the Department of Liquor Control, but I wanted to put those in there so you know who went. And then on the other side, I did add tobacco compliance checks because it's still about IDing and making sure that they are following the laws. And we only had 1 failure on that one, which is also good. I do want to let you know that I will let you know how the responsible retailer, what we kind of plan on doing with the challenges that we've had this past year. And hopefully you can continue to kind of promote it as something that will be a resource to the retailers.
And the responsive retailer, the retailer has to agree to participate in the
Right,
program.
yes.
Okay. Because
So,
there's
but it's,
lots of
yeah,
confusion
it's
with
definitely
it.
like a
Yeah.
voluntary thing. But it might still be, we are there for them. We let them know if they're, about to, their compliance is about to expire, and give them resources. So yes, so just if you have somebody, especially if you have somebody who failed, or if you have a new business, I know there's been some new businesses that we will now reach out to, but maybe I can give you all something, or the town clerk something to just give to them about, hey, you're a new retailer here, this is a program that can help support you in making sure you're in compliance. So that's the current status, and I did ask about the ones that failed if they've had any online training, but the Department of Liquor Control hasn't been able to get back to me because they're doing a whole new online training that they're trying to get up and running. There's only 2 people now in that department kind of doing a lot of the enforcement piece. So and they've been kind of put into this role of creating an online training, which isn't really what they were trained to do or hired to do. You know how it is. So, so anyway, I was like, let me know when you're back. So if there's any, I'd like to let you all know probably next time I come, and just let them know. I'll just keep on top of that so that if people do fail, I can check in and make sure they're doing online training if they're not coming to the Department of Control on-site trainings. Because I feel like they should be doing something, not just doing it on their own. So that's all I got for that. can I go into the, I don't know if you guys need to take off your hats as liquor commissioners, or we can just keep it on.
And also, just let me ask you,
Yeah.
is anybody in the audience who'd like to see the document that we're, this is
to go
just an introduction to the primer. No? Okay.
So I did send Jan and Peter the primer that was created with the Windham Regional Commission. They're supposed to put it on their site as well. They just have a link. I just have to check in with Susan about that. Unfortunately, we did not bring it today. I was out and.
Do you guys know?
We have copies.
Oh, you have a copy?
Yeah.
Awesome, sweet. All right, great.
Great.
So this is a referral to that, reference to that. So this was a PowerPoint, so we'll hand out PowerPoint. So the purpose of this, just so you know, we're going to all of our towns, which is exciting, not just Brattleboro Area Prevention Coalition, but all 4 prevention coalitions. There's actually 5 prevention coalitions, but 4 of those prevention coalitions are going to all their towns as well to go over this primer. This primer was created in Lamoille County with their regional commission, and so we've adopted it and made it our own for the Windham Regional, for the Windham County. So the purpose of this is not to restrict or mandate any municipalities to take action. It's really just to provide new options and ideas about what might be appropriate for your community, and to help inform about the importance of how municipality planning and regulation and also placemaking plays a role in creating a healthier community when it comes to substance use. And we are always available to provide technical assistance to help you with best practices and helping you with local data, and also providing any kind of sample policies and bylaws that may be helpful. We definitely use your bylaws, as we're going to be going to a lot of our towns and trying to get other towns to adopt the bylaws that you have, the addendum that you have for the liquor licensees. We were just in the town, and it was just a very quick, here you go, here's the permit, here's a license, and we just want to try to encourage other towns to kind of do the due diligence that you do in making sure that they understand their responsibilities to that. The thing that I love this quote is that it's from adapted by Winston Churchill. It says, "We shape our public spaces, and afterwards our public spaces shape us." This is an emerging field of creating placemaking and using municipality regulatory and non-regulatory actions to encourage a healthier community. And obviously we know the effects of substance use, and of course opioids is always being discussed, but substance use in general can cause a lot of negative impacts on communities, and I have a few listed here. And I use the example on the next page, which is a pie chart, and you can see that the perception of harm among our high school students in Vermont, there's binge drinking. They think 36% think there's a great risk. Marijuana, 24% think there's a great risk of using marijuana regularly. 68% think that smoking a pack a day every day is a great risk. And I think that cigarette piece, right? So let's just look at cigarettes for a minute. You can't really smoke anywhere anymore. We just made all of our public housing smoke-free nationally. A lot of communities are working on providing places of public spaces that are smoke-free. And we also talk a lot about the harms of cigarettes. We've taxed them significantly in states, and that has reduced. Now, of course, we have vaping, which is now bringing the use of nicotine up again, but a lot of it has to do with regulatory change. And the next thing that's coming up is a resolution for Tobacco 21 is to increase the age to 21 for tobacco sales, as well as looking at flavored tobacco, which is generally promoting tobacco to young people. So it continues, but I just wanted to kind of show the difference of perception of harm, which is a huge piece in young people choosing to use substances or not. And then the next page is is in the primer, which is the model this is a prevention model that's national, but this is just Vermont in the sense that we used Windham County as some of the examples. So you have the individual, you have the relationship, the people that are around them, organizations like schools or their workplaces, or what they consider their communities. And you have the broader community, which is kind of where you all start to fall in, or the town, the planning commission starts to come in, and then you've got the policies and systems, either local, state, national. And all of those play a role in how we can help prevent substance abuse in our community. And that can come through town plans. Now, is the town plan, you all approved it in April, right? The draft? So it's pretty much like, is there any more to talk about it, or is it ready to go? Is it like how?
It won't be actually updated again for several years.
Okay.
But in the implementation, there are additional actions that the town will take.
Okay. Because I'd love to talk maybe about, like, is there still time to maybe add some language in there? Because I think the only thing I found in that kind of referred to anything around health. It was something that said to provide municipal faculties and services to ensure the public health and safety and to improve the quality of life in Brattleboro.
Right.
So I don't know if there's any room in there to.
So the language that's just been adopted has just been adopted, but again, as implementation actions are taken, there may be an opportunity for some of this to inform that, so I'll share this with the planning department. The next time the plan will be changed will be several years from now.
Okay, great. Well then, and we're hoping to talk to them as well, just so you know, the planning commission, to see if there's some way that that can get recognized. But yeah, so there's the town plan, and then there's obviously zoning. We'll talk a little bit about that, and then there's ordinances or bylaws, and then there's just non-regulatory, such as if you wanted to encourage a resolution or smoking areas, so that at events or in regions or maybe even downtown of these are places that you can smoke to keep secondhand smoke or vaping exposure reduced. Those are all things that could be done. And then, so we have the town plan, which I'll hop past, though that is something we definitely would love to work on. And I think you go in now. We have Rolf and I doing this together, tag team.
So again, our job is not, or our mission is not to tell you, what to do. Our job is to provide a buffet table of things that have been recommended by the CDC or other organizations as possible actions. And so there are, of course, a bunch of regulatory actions that can be taken, but there's also non-regulatory things, which we'll touch on later. And this, obviously includes things such as content-neutral signage, which means not having advertising for, help me.
Yeah, so you can either so content neutral, so you can't say don't advertise alcohol or tobacco, or if in the future maybe marijuana. You can't specifically say you can't advertise this particular product, because that's freedom of speech, right? So it's like, but you can say less advertisement, so that will reduce the amount of advertisement to, especially when you think about like outdoor advertisement is a perfect example.
Right. But also in general restricting or limiting availability, which can actually, on our next slide here, the how to reduce, can be related to retailer density. And there's a whole bunch of different ways to, which the CDC, this book actually talks about in detail, the many different ways to measure density or to consider it, including capping the number of retailers that are relative to a population size. And on our next slide, and the one that we've handed out to you, we've made this, this one, the bar graph. And our bar graph, this is a measure of the alcohol outlet density per 1,000 residents, which is just, again, one of many ways that the CDC talks about alcohol, or outlet density. And as you can see, we've got the range here, and these are, of course, we could find other, we could do a further look at just all the towns that are around us, but for this particular presentation, we've got Rockingham, Burlington, South Burlington, Bennington, Rutland, and Brattleboro. And way over on the side, this is a limit which is set in California at the county level. And the reason that this is all interesting is that the quote there on the bottom from this particular CDC document, that regulating alcohol outlet density is one of the most effective strategies for reducing excessive alcohol consumption and related harms. So again, we're not trying to say this is what you definitely need to concentrate on, but it is one of the things that's out there. We'd love to.
Yeah, so we just took one of these kind of things here and just kind of did a quick, just to
Right.
see how many, what our outlet density was as far as per 1,000 people, which is
Right.
one of the examples of checking how to reduce density. And then there's other ones of like how many you have in close proximity, or how much you have within a specific
The specific
area, like
neighborhood, or
yeah.
whether it's clustered, or
And this does not count
count
the
the-
50 events that got alcohol permits in Brattleboro last year. So we did go and talk to Hillary, and I counted up all the permits. And there was 50 events that occurred in Brattleboro last year that got approved for alcohol permits. So it's just kind of something we'd love to kind of explore with you. We have the capacity to do some of this work to kind of look at all the components, because this is just one kind of slice of it. But we just want to make you aware that
that's just out
something
there as a major concept, and then with the epidemiologists. So in the primer, actually, as Cassandra already mentioned, we are highlighting to other towns the Brattleboro liquor licensee bylaw, but there's just some other examples which we have included here, like the prohibiting paraphernalia establishments in Ludlow, anywhere in town.
Yeah, and a lot of that's in preparation of retail marijuana, and making sure that there's some things like not having it either in a town or having it within an area of young people.
Or, right, like in Weathersfield, where it's within half radius of a school,
Half mile radius.
right.
And then the next page is around
Smoking, and, right. So in Springfield, they prohibit smoking on the same side of the street of the library, more than 175 feet from a public entrance, or, interestingly, in front of establishments that choose to put up a no smoking sign. And just some of the non-regulatory actions. We've also started working on the 3450 campaign that's out of the state. I'm not sure if you've heard of that, but basically the idea is that there's 3 behaviors that contribute significantly to 4 diseases that cause more than 50% of all the deaths, premature deaths in Vermont. And so that includes what we're doing right now, which is being sedentary and sitting in a chair. And so one of the cool things that has been done with the here with the VDH with Schuyler Foss, they managed to get snowshoe rentals out of the libraries, and that type of thing. But we're also
And we're looking at businesses right now as well, large businesses, to try to implement this 3-450 within workplaces. But communities, there's also a whole Department of Health recommendation to communities on how you can be a 3-450 community, and looking at how to increase physical activity, increase better nutrition, as well as reduce tobacco use.
And so in the future, we hope to maybe be invited back for survey data, state and local, community outreach and education, offering of technical assistance and resources, and
Recognizing anything that you're doing that's an effort to help to address substance use, and helping you to do effective actions that will actually make an impact in this community. The rest of this handout is really just some data that's come out of our recent youth risk behavior survey data, as well as kind of our state, and when it comes to alcohol, and we have lots more, but we figured we'd just kind of give you a little bit of a taste of some of the stuff that we can always offer to you, as well as doing some customized work if you requested it.
I noticed that it seems to be the snowier states here on the binge drinking.
That's true, right?
I just wonder if there's a correlation.
Yeah. Well, it's, well, you have seasonal, I mean, you do have seasonal.
It's
Yeah.
just the first thing I looked for.
We have
Except for
that-
Hawaii, I don't know what's going on down there.
Well, Hawaii's got a lot of alcoholism.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're one of 17
then-
states that's high in binge drinking.
there's also kind of a natural link to the whole compassionate cities thing, and that the quote at the very bottom of that same page of 18, just the concept that there's significant numbers of people in our communities who are struggling in recovery, and that there are things maybe we can do as a community that would be compassionate towards them. So,
Only 116 residents. Oh, it does not include the rest.
That was in 2017, in 1 year, yeah.
Yes, higher than that.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Do any of my fellow board people have any questions?
What's the website? For the primer or the, yeah.
so
Well, it
there's
should
a-
be at the Regional Planning Commission,
There's
the regional.
The
Windham
the
Regional.
primer website, and there's also for the CDC guide, a density that can be found. It's a very long URL, but it can be easily be found by Googling alcohol outlet density or alcohol density CDC. That'll get you right to it.
And can I send you the primer link?
Yes.
That would be great. For
I can send you the link for that,
BCTV.
too.
Awesome, we'll do that for you. Cool.
Thank you.
I'll just throw out, what's your current take on the current marijuana law in Vermont and how it's, I mean, it's so early that I
It
guess
is.
it's.
I mean, I feel like we're leading up to it becoming a retail possibility.
Yeah.
To meaning that, and in Colorado, we've been talking with them, and they have found that some towns will get town tax, and so some of the more vulnerable towns will take advantage of that, and putting people more susceptible, kind of these concentrations of retailers. I mean, we already have 3 head shops and now a new CBD, CBD. I was
CBD oil.
Thank you. CBD. Right across from the Boys and Girls Club, and I do get concerned for a lot of towns, but I think especially Brattleboro being kind of a hub, that some of the businesses will take advantage of that if there is a way to start selling retail. And I don't know, it's a perfect time for towns like the ones that are in here trying to kind of preemptively address that. So I think right now, my concern is just, what kids think about marijuana. We are doing a lot of education the next year around that. Funding's been really low. But a lot of kids think it's, all they've been hearing is recreational and medicinal, recreational, medicinal. That's the message that they have. They think it heals you, and they think it's something that's fun. And you can see just from our most recent youth behavior data, the perception of harm is really low. They think their parents don't really necessarily have the same disapproval as they do with alcohol and tobacco. So yeah, we're very concerned. It's the one drug that's increasing among our young people, where other ones are either stable or going down. So we want to nip that pretty soon. We're really focused on the kids right now with that, and the tobacco companies are ready to go for this marijuana. So we can sit there and talk about it being local, but in reality, they're going to start selling it at a cheaper rate.
And the alcohol companies as well. The beer companies are also heavily investigating they already know how to market and distribute. Marketing is 90% of the game.
Yeah. So that's what we're hoping the state will really be thinking about, is how do we make sure that doesn't happen. But I'll tell you, there's no money right now given to us from the state to really address it to the level it needs to be. Or even nationally. So we're really kind of got our hands tied as coalitions on what we can do to really get out there and talk about it.
And we've also been busy with the middle schools, with juuling in middle and high schools, because it's, the juuls, it's as much nicotine in a single pod as a whole pack of cigarettes.
Right.
And they're confiscating it, pretty regularly at Leland and Gray and other places.
But people are using that for marijuana as well, including youth. So, and you can't tell what they're using it for. It doesn't have the same smell. So yes, and I know that our SAP got there's something called DAB, which is 90% THC, and it looks like earwax, and they sold a kit to our SAP at the high school, and we gave her a free bag for it. You basically blow torch a quarter, you stick the dab on it, and you suck it through a glass tube. And that was all purchased at the Harmony Underground. So, they're already selling the products, they just don't have the actual product. I mean, they're paraphernalia. And there are state laws against paraphernalia, but it has to get enforced. And some states are doing that. Up in Newport, the police department is addressing that, trying to get rid of the paraphernalia. But
Yeah, there's also this issue of public versus private spaces.
Mm-hmm.
It's very tricky,
Yeah.
I think. But it might just be a temporary situation until the legislature actually.
And I'm not sure if you guys are going to be getting to approve these You know, I don't know what the plan will be. If they
Right.
start, is it gonna go through the state where they, like the tobacco licenses, or are they gonna go through the town? And I have to find that out, but I don't even know if they've gotten there yet.
I would doubt the state would give the town much
Yeah.
leeway.
No,
That's
yeah,
not really
I wouldn't either.
their MO.
Especially since they're probably gonna move to taxation and regulation, they're gonna wanna just retain that.
Yeah.
I would be, just as a note, cautious on grouping the use of THC-based cannabis with CBD oils.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, no, I'm just saying,
absolutely.
that, okay,
Just-
they're saying
just-
that,
just
but the
that it-
kids are
it's-
walking out and seeing
Right, we just wanna
marijuana,
like
so-
make sure we're giving them really good education on
Oh,
the difference of
absolutely.
it.
No,
Yeah.
absolutely. It's more the proximity and potential for confusion right across from the Boys and Girls Club, not that it's the same
Yeah.
thing at all.
Are you going in and having conversations with them about the difference between the cannabinoid strain and the THC?
Oh, and they're definitely like mentioning that they're not planning on selling THC, but they still have a marijuana leaf on their sign, which is right across from the Boys and Girls Club. So there's not like, I don't know if they're having that conversation with the kids at the Boys and Girls
Oh,
Club.
no, I meant,
Yeah.
are you guys having that conversation?
Well,
Not them, I
yeah,
don't know.
no, it's okay.
Yeah.
No, it's another coalition. Somebody who works at another coalition went in there and talked to them, and
Oh,
they
great.
came back and said that they're definitely not. You know, they said we're not intending
Yeah.
to move in that direction.
Okay.
of
Oh,
selling-
sorry, I'm
selling.
still like misspeaking, I think.
Oh.
Is there a coalition of people who are going into the Boys and Girls Club to begin to educate them on the difference between cannabinoid oil and THC?
When we get the funding, yes, we will do that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
That's what
We're
I was
doing our
asking.
best. We're
Sorry
doing-
that
no,
I
we're
didn't
trying
spit
to-
it out right.
No, we're doing it. I mean, we're trying to get a curriculum in the schools, but oh goodness, I'm
Oh, that's
so
you. Oh, I thought it was me.
I took words off.
Whatever.
My son.
That's what I thought it was for me.
But
I was like, oh, the kids.
yeah, so we'll keep you informed as we start
Great.
to address that. But we're definitely, as coalitions, trying to get the word out to our young people. And I'm just gonna let that go because it's probably gonna take just as long for me to turn it off.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you.
Would you like this one back?
No, that's what you want.
No, you guys know.
Data, so.
Okay, great.
I would entertain a motion to adjourn as liquor commissioners.
So moved.
We have a motion to adjourn as liquor commissioners. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Motion carries 3-0. Next up, we're on to new business, and we're going to talk about some capital equipment bid awards.
May I address the 5 of them as a cluster?
You may.
Thank
you
you.
would.
So the first 2, both are being purchased off of the state of Vermont bids. So the state does a procurement for a variety of different types of vehicles each year, and then municipalities around the state are able to purchase off that state contract. The pickup truck that we need, a 1-ton crew cab pickup truck that we need for the Department of Public Works. We are able to obtain through that state bid for a total cost after the value of the trade-in of $27,758 as against a budgeted amount of $45,000. The good news overarching these 5 different purchases that we're asking for your approval of this evening is each one of them is under budget. A couple of them, like this first one, are significantly under budget and others are just barely under budget. But we did really well with these bids this year. The second pickup truck that's being bought off of the state contract this year is a half-ton pickup truck with a snowplow for the maintenance and custodial team. The price on that is net price of $32,697 as against a budget of $35,000. The next item is the excavator. You'll remember that in the capital budget this year, we have an excavator. Unlike almost every piece of equipment that we buy, this one is a new piece of equipment. It's not replacing an existing excavator. The reason that we asked for permission to be able to get this equipment is because it's needed for compliance with the new, more stringent drainage regulations. So we have to do more regulation of our ditches. It'll also be useful for other purposes. It's just a more nimble piece of equipment than using our big equipment that we had already in our fleet. We did a competitive bid ourselves on this one. We received 3 bids, and the low bid that is a suitable piece of equipment is from the Salem Farm Supply of Salem, New York for $100,683 against a budgeted amount of $125,000. And We also are buying a 15-ton trailer. This is something that we bid ourselves, put out an RFP, received just a single bid, but it is below our budgeted amount of $25,000. Vassar Complete Auto Service of Greenfield, Massachusetts bid $20,200. And the Sidewalk tractor plow that was approved at the town meeting back in March. We had $140,000 budgeted and received a bid, just a single bid in response to that solicitation. But it is an awardable bid to HP Fairfield of Morrisville, Vermont in the amount of $139,752. So we would ask for your approval that we proceed with these 5 purchases.
Yeah. And all of these purchases were approved by the select board and town meeting.
Correct.
Anybody have any questions?
No, thanks for that. Thanks for the note about
Anyone in the public have any questions?
the transition out of gas and diesel.
Yes.
Thank you for that.
Would somebody like to make a motion? And could we do it as, if we could do it as one big one, couldn't we, if we wanted to?
You can make a motion to approve
All this
this
stuff.
and this and this. Yes, you sure can.
Would somebody like to do that?
I'll do that for you if you'd like. I'll make a motion to approve the award of a bid for a 1-ton crew cab pickup truck in the net amount of $27,758 to Shearer Chevrolet of Burlington, Vermont, and to approve the award of a bid for a 1/2-ton pickup truck with a plow in the net amount of $32,697 to Shearer Chevrolet of Burlington, Vermont. And also a motion to approve the award for a bid for an excavator with warranty and an 18-inch bucket in the total amount of $100,683 to Salem Farm Supply of Salem, New York. Also to approve the award of a bid for a 15-ton trailer in the total amount of $20,200 to Vassar Complete Auto Service of Greenfield, Massachusetts. And finally, a motion to approve the award of a bid for a sidewalk tractor plow in the total amount of $139,752 to HP Fairfield of Morrisville, Vermont.
We have a motion to approve bid awards for the purchase of 5 pieces of equipment. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries 3-0. Thank you.
Good job.
Good stuff to buy. Next up, and this came because of something I mentioned, is a discussion about Uber and Lyft licensing. Because taxi, you have to, in order to operate a taxi in Brattleboro, you have to get a license. And with this new Uber and Lyft and all that kind of stuff, I made the inquiry, well, shouldn't we be doing something about that? So our town attorney has provided us with information.
All right, so I think it was about a year ago, I hate to say it's been sitting that long or perhaps longer, but we were looking at the issue of sort of an uneven playing field with regard to how Uber and Lyft and what are called transportation network companies are regulated compared to how we regulate taxis. And certainly there, at that time, and I'll get to it in a minute, there was and is still an uneven playing field. But we also learned during last winter that the legislature was going to take up some legislation with regard to these transportation network companies, which they did, and they passed Act Number 3, which were amendments to Title 23, which really did, and I'm summarizing, but I've attached to your memo the new law, but they've required these transportation network companies. Let me back up. Transportation network company is specifically defined, and they deal with what are prearranged rides that you get and arrange those rides digitally through apps. So anybody who's used Uber or Lyft before probably knows what I'm talking about. But interestingly enough, they have exempted and excluded taxis from that definition. So, because taxis theoretically you would hail down. But I think you can also, what they don't really address in the legislation is the fact that you can call a taxi company on your phone and say, come pick me up.
And around
So-
here, you have to.
But
really.
they exclude taxis and shuttle buses, things like that, from the legislation. So the new legislation in terms of improvements or leveling that playing field, they required these companies to carry certain levels of insurance, to run background checks on their drivers, proof of inspection, and to have certain policies with regard to use of zero tolerance policies for alcohol and drugs, etc. The law also provides certain administrative enforcement for those provisions. So the town, and also the new legislation preempts any town regulation to the extent that it's inconsistent with the state legislation.
Of course.
The last thing that they do in the legislation is they also create a study committee to study and report to the legislature in January of 2019 whether vehicles for hire, which is a much broader category, should be studied and as to whether or not there should be state legislation for the licensing and regulation of those vehicles for hire. Vehicles for hire would include things like limousines, taxis, shuttle buses, things like that. So currently, the town of Brattleboro has a taxi ordinance. We do not regulate transportation network companies. And what I tried to do for purposes of a comparison is in the chart. On the left-hand side, I had put whether a permit is required, what would disqualify a driver, fees, the ability to revoke the license, the insurance requirements, the background checks, etc., and compare that between the new law as it applies to transportation network companies, what we have in the town taxi ordinance, and then I had put into your packets a draft proposed ordinance that would essentially be an ordinance that would cover vehicles for hire, so that we're not just looking just at taxis, but any vehicle for hire. And a vehicle for hire would also include transportation network company vehicles, because you're still hiring them. But then trying to figure out how we would do that ordinance without being preempted by the state. So you'll see, and I'm not going to go into tonight because it gets, we can if you like, but as far as the background checks that they go into as to what we currently do with our background checks versus what the new state law does, or the insurance requirements that the state has gone into great detail on of whether somebody's on duty, whether somebody's in the car actively compared to what we have for our insurance. You'll see the differences. But when we have issues of background checks and insurance, because it's regulated by the state, in the proposed ordinance, I've said, well, let's just do that as proposed, as per the new state law. That way we don't run afoul of any preemption issues. But at least that proposed ordinance, and you're not here tonight as a first reading, this is really just a discussion of whether we want to, the big question for the board, I think, is do you want to adopt this fall a proposed ordinance on vehicles for hire, or do you want to wait and see what the legislature does next legislative season? So that's the big issue. But we can go down through the chart, and I'm available to answer any questions with regard to either the proposed ordinance or the differences between our ordinance and the state law.
And the proposed ordinance, the way it's written, it does include, it's going to include things like Uber and Lyft.
Yes.
So we could do that. I mean, I am, please, anybody who's in the legislature that's listening to me, I don't want to wait for the legislature because they'll have a study committee and God knows something will never happen to it. So I think for, at least in my opinion, us waiting to the legislature to get their study committee and then everybody forget about it,
If we set our ordinance now-ish, fall, then at least the people who are looking to get into this kind of business know what to expect from us.
Yeah.
We can't make any promises that the state wouldn't, a year, overturn something or make a change that we have to do, but at least they'd have the idea of where they stand with us.
And to me, the reason I brought this up, it's more, it's a fairness issue, but it's also a public safety issue.
It is both.
Because you hear about these horror stories of people that get in an Uber and, they never come back or whatever. So I just feel like there's some responsibility on our part.
I agree.
To me, it's really, that's what drove me to bring this up, so.
I think you're right, it is a safety issue, huge safety issue, and it is also a fairness issue. It needs to be the same playing field.
From the fairness issue with regard to fees, and I forgot to really mention that, but because we don't regulate on a townwide basis the transportation network companies, though our definition of taxi is a fairly broad definition. I believe there's one, Jan, that actually voluntarily complied with getting
One
a
Uber
tax-
driver?
One Uber driver.
Oh,
But there are probably many more who just say, well, I don't need to until I'm forced to with regard to that. But the taxi drivers are all paying registration fees and license operation fees to the town on that. So that is certainly one of the examples of an uneven playing field between the two.
If you don't mind me asking, is that for each driver pays that fee, or is it the
Right.
company that is paying?
We have a $25 per year per driver, and then the taxi cab company pays $100 per year.
For
And
the
then
vehicle.
per vehicle, it's less for additional
$50
vehicles,
for
$50 for
renewal,
additional
yes.
renewals. Yeah.
So the drivers and the vehicles each have a fee that are paid.
Right, but if you have a company that has 3 vehicles and 6 drivers, you're paying 300 plus.
You're paying for 3 vehicles and 6 drivers.
Yeah, but if you're a one person doing Uber, you're paying 25 and 100. Is that per year?
Well, that would be under, yes, because if we were to adopt that, then yes, it would be $25 for the year for the driver, and then the $100 for the vehicle.
I do have a little insight into the Uber thing because I've signed up for Uber and I'm an Uber driver officially, and I did this.
Are you the one that voluntarily complied?
No.
Oh, no.
I'll tell you why.
Lock him up now.
You have the right to remain silent.
That's great.
So I've decided it's certainly not for me because you really do have. I mean, it's not a huge moneymaker, and I think the biggest learning I learned, not only is it not for me, but in the process I learned that there's going to be a lot of people who are dabbling as being an Uber driver who can do it maybe one night a week or one night in a morning, and it very possibly will not be attractive enough for them to sign up, and because you can be very part-time as an Uber driver. There's no really minimum requirements of how many trips you have to take. You have to keep applying for the background checks, but there's no minimum fee or anything like that, so that you have to pay to Uber, because they extract their fee per ride, and then they pay you a low percentage of what the driver gets. So you really, I just want to point out that there'll be probably, I mean, I would estimate just by gleaming I just opened the app, and there is somebody a couple blocks from here ready to go. But
Really?
yeah, but I don't think it's more than 15 to 20, and probably out of that, maybe only 5 or 6 really gung-ho drivers that might really be willing to pay that amount, I don't know, on a yearly basis. I'm not sure, that's just my sense. The state of things with rideshare right now in Brattleboro.
That's interesting
Um,
insight.
But I think it might increase. I do agree with the sort of level playing field idea.
I figured you
It's
would.
just, I'm wondering if it's level if the taxi company, which is retaining a lot more of the earnings than arguably an Uber driver, you could argue that they have the funds, whereas a
Yeah.
single Uber driver who's driving
Their
Saturday
car.
night, every night, as
Yeah.
a side business, is should be charged the same amount. But
That's
I don't have
interesting.
strong feelings about it, but I just wanted to relay that I do have a little
What do you think about that?
insight on it.
It's certainly probably the case with regard to somebody doing it very part-time, but then that's ultimately a question with any business owner or person getting a business license in town, whether they do it only, selling something on Sunday afternoons and they still have to get a license, or do they do it enough to make it worth the license fees? So I think that's a common weighing of the factors there that you're going to have in any business. I'm not sure. You theoretically could talk about having exemptions for the for the vehicle, but then you're creating less of a level playing field right there.
Right, right. I just, my only other comment is how would you actually figure out who's doing it? Because you basically just have a card that you throw into a window, and the vehicle itself is your own vehicle, so I'm not sure it would really be super easy to enforce.
And
if you-
it's the same concept, and this is what's really difficult about it. It's the same concept of the Airbnb and HomeAway,
Right.
and that's what the state's dealing with now on that. They finally have an agreement with Airbnb to pony up the taxes, but it's really the same thing. It's like, how do you regulate something that certain people are doing the exact same thing of somebody who's had to go get health inspections or things.
Yeah.
So I think that's and I don't know if there's an easy answer to that right now, because we went through this. We were going to try to figure out how the town could get people who, are renting out their space for more than 2 weeks out of the year, which is legally, state law says you are, considered a bed and breakfast or a hotel. How on the town level, how do you identify who those people are when there's nothing on the state level that makes you, do anything? But now there is on that, so.
Although it's easy, just unlike Uber and an Airbnb situation, it's easy to just call up on the site and see who's doing it with names attached. Versus Uber is a very sort of the drivers. You would only encounter them if you actually went for a drive.
Right, you would almost have to, with regard to enforcement, run, sting operations of calling an Uber or coming by, checking, do you have your vehicle for hire license?
Yeah, I'm only throwing that out there because we have several ordinances that are unenforceable for various reasons, or we choose not to enforce them because our police have better things to do.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that. I think, but I just feel, for a lot of reasons, and a lot of it is level playing field, but it's safety. And, the other day I was at the chamber, and it's not an Uber thing, it's somebody rented a property on Airbnb, and they came in and they were freaking out because they'd stayed the night there. It was awful. There was bed bugs, and they came and going, "Save me!" And I thought, it's one of these situations where if this person who owned this thing had to go through the health and fire inspection, because these people came from out of state to go to the Marlboro Music Festival, and their entire weekend was like destroyed because they were in this bed bug situation. So if we can avoid, I just like to help people avoid something like that. It's the same thing with the rental properties, and to me, it's the same thing with an Uber or Lyft or whatever. If we can just, I don't want to say save the life of someone, but you know what I mean? It's like,
But
it's
we have
the
a little bit of
reputation.
responsibility.
Yeah,
I
so that's
think.
sort of why I'm sort of
No,
thinking that.
But I also.
But I get what you're saying too.
I do too.
I just want to throw out one last thing, which I know is
Thanks for
in
that.
Burlington.
itching.
Burlington, when you go to, if you sign up as an Uber driver anywhere in Vermont, there's you have to have a car that's 15 years or younger. In Burlington, they've changed it. You must have a 10-year or younger. I guess because they don't want jalopies picking up people and reflecting badly on their town. But just to throw that out, if you're going to be having a list of things for us to think about in an ordinance.
And Burlington was really the driver behind the transportation network legislation, I think, because Burlington did have a city ordinance that covered vehicles for hire transportation network companies. So a lot of what is in the new state law has some derivation with the Burlington ordinance. When we looked at this a year ago, we thought that the Burlington ordinance was a little bit overkill for Brattleboro in terms of going to that complexity. But I think a vehicle for hire ordinance would hopefully find that sweet spot in between of letting the state regulate transportation network companies with regard to the insurance, background checks, all of those sorts of items that really go to the safety, background checks and the insurance and inspections. But let the regulation of the business part of it be by the town. So.
Do you want us to bring the draft ordinance to you as a proposed ordinance for first reading on August 21st, or do you want to give this further consideration in some other manner?
Yeah. Well, I don't want to be the one that goes, yes. The two of us aren't here. I don't know if we want to have the discussion with them, if they at least want to even think about an ordinance. I mean, I don't know how everybody else.
I mean, the ordinance has been drafted, so one way to get it in front of the full five of you would be to just put it on for first reading, and then it can always be defeated at that time if you don't want to go forward and actually adopt it.
Have responsibility to the community for safety reasons at least, and I'm stressing now a little bit about the money part. Now that you've brought that up.
But it's the same thing again with the people that are running the things out of their homes for 2 weeks.
It's almost like, we're just watching maybe I shouldn't say that. The evolution of different systems, that were more expensive and more time consuming into newer systems, and there might be pain in that evolution for some of the people on the older systems, like taxis or something.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that I have more concerns over Airbnbs than I do Uber drivers, just for it's much more common.
You got to watch a Lifetime original movie, and then you're totally worried about
nobody wants to do that. No. That's not a good way to.
Those are always the ones
when
the
watch
person gets
that
in the
stuff.
Uber thing, and then you never get back out. So.
Oh my God.
Right.
Okay. Okay, so
back to the subject.
Right. Do we want to bring it back for a first reading, and then we can decide what we're going to do?
Sounds like a good idea.
We don't need an action from you.
Okay, perfect.
We will do that.
Thanks for the work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good. All right.
Can I summarize the next one?
And now what our assistant fire chief has been waiting for.
He has, patiently. So.
Thanks, Lenny.
Lenny's here to respond to any particular questions you might have about what actually goes on out in the field. Bob is here on this item as well to address any of the legal nuances that you might want to dive into. My goal in introducing it is to actually encourage you to proceed with adoption of this 2 weeks from tonight as a means by which the town can comply with new state requirements and the enforcement of health codes. It's an unfunded mandate that the state has adopted some requirements that it hasn't changed what is permitted, what's legal and what's not legal. It's imposed upon local health officers some additional obligations for what they must do when they get called out to a site. So instead of, for instance, being called out to let's say check out a absence of smoke alarms or a particular outlet that somebody thinks is dangerous. And instead of being able to go and look at that situation that's been complained upon and take action to fix that if that is something that needs attention, the requirement now is to do a full inspection of every unit in the building and all the different aspects of the related rental housing code. The this is a much greater concern even to other communities around the state, because most communities around the state have volunteer health officers, so
Yeah.
they're really at a loss for sort of how to comply with it. We've had a few different meetings where we've worked with our staff that do, as part of their broader duties with the town, health officer. Lenny's a health officer. Brian Bannon is an assistant health officer. We believe that we've identified some ways in which they can approach this in compliance with the state requirements, and sort of have procedures that they'll follow that will keep this a manageable task. But in following up on situations where they identify a violation, we're concerned that if they have to travel under the state statutes, that it's going to be a much more cumbersome, much more difficult situation for the town to enforce. What we want to do through this ordinance is adopt the state's rental housing code in its entirety, as it may be changed from time to time, as the town's own rental housing code. It's part of our health and safety ordinance. And so that's the very simple ordinance that's before you tonight, is to simply take the state's language without repeating it, because if we repeated it, then every time the state needs to change
Right,
it,
you'd have
or
to
every time the state changes it, we would need to change ours too.
Yep.
So instead, what we want to do is just say, see the state regulations, we're enforcing those as local code. By doing this, we'll be able to write local tickets, municipal tickets for the violations that don't get cured in the appropriate amount of time.
So the thing that we have here, Chapter 8, the only thing that's being changed is we're adding Article 3 section.
That's exactly right, adopting the state rental housing code.
Right, so that's the only change.
That's the only thing. All the rest of it exists today.
Okay.
Yep.
Well,
Except
8-31
Right.
designates it as a civil ordinance
Right.
with the enforcement through municipal ticketing and/or health orders.
Which is also under Article 3, though. The Article 3 is the only
Oh,
new
yeah,
piece
also
here.
Article 3.
Yeah.
Yep. And we recommend your approval. Actually, you don't need to act on it tonight. We recommend that you agree that this is necessary and ask us to bring it back for your adoption next time.
If you guys think it's necessary, so.
Yeah, Lenny, do you have anything to add?
I just don't want people to, if we can go into a building and for a particular problem and see other issues, obviously we make sure that those issues are taken care of as well. But a lot of times, issues I can handle by just calling the landlord and getting the landlord and tenant together and come up with a solution. Whereas the state saying I got to go out and do a complete investigation of the whole building, which there's not enough time in a day just to go out and do that.
Yeah.
So we're going
I
to create a
wouldn't think so.
tablet-based checklist to make that process more efficient. We think procedurally we can address the burden that this does place. It places a burden on the town. It's an unfunded mandate of the state. But then there's the whole question of, we've got to do what we've got to do out at the sites. How can we make the follow-up on uncured violations be as efficient as it can be? And we believe this will accomplish that.
So just along that, with regard to enforcement and Lenny can speak to this, but from a practical standpoint,
Yeah.
when he goes out and he does the inspection and goes through the checklist, there may be a couple of items that you need to do this, you need to do that, and you write it up saying, okay, cure these things, within a week or within whatever reasonable time that those things can be cured. But if they're not, if it's truly a health problem where the public health is in danger, well, then we either issue an emergency health order or come to the board sitting as a Board of Health for injunctive relief. You must do this. But for some of the people who just don't fix the little things, it gives us the ability to issue civil tickets. And then by adopting it as the state code as a local ordinance, when we enforce those tickets and they either pay a waiver fee or if we have to go to the Judicial Bureau to enforce that, most of that money comes back to the town. So that's a fairly small amount to compensate for the added burdens to the health inspector, but it helps.
Yeah, and in the absence of this, none of it does.
Right.
Yeah. All right, Lenny.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so the plan is to bring it up at the next meeting?
For adoption.
For adoption?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Sound good, everybody?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, heating oil bid
We issued an RFP for heating oil and received 5 bids. There was a relatively wide variation in prices. The 4 that are not being recommended for award were within 17 cents of each other, but we got a very good price from Discount Oil, higher than the last couple of winters, but very competitive within the current market for $2.28.9 per gallon. And we recommend your approval that we award the bid to Discount Oil of Keene, New Hampshire for that amount.
Does anyone on the board have any questions or comments?
Tim, I'm reading our note.
Because I know that we have a member of our community that really wanted to be here
Yes.
and couldn't be here,
Yes.
I'm going to speak for Daniel Quip, who wanted to.
Although I'm also
Oh.
here to speak to this.
Oh, right
Oh,
on.
excellent. Well, then,
Would you like
most
to
of it
go?
I'm going to leave to you maybe, but I think Daniel wanted to further encourage the board, as we've pledged to do, to move when we can, in my opinion, inserting here, in a financially responsible way.
That's not what he said.
No, that's my word.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Because I'm the one speaking, I'm allowed to do that. Away from fossil fuels when we can, in a financially responsible way. Sorry. But I'm happy to see there's somebody here who
Yeah, if you want to come up.
Did you want to say something before?
No,
Oh,
I
okay.
think I'll defer.
Oh, boy.
That was great. I mean,
Let us know who you are, where you're from,
I was just going to read
to the
off
viewing
this.
public.
I'm Linda Bailey, and I live here in Brattleboro. I came because Daniel did mention that this was coming up, and I did see his presentation that he gave of the amount of CO2 that is produced by this amount of fuel. And one question I had, that seems to be the same amount of fuel that was authorized for last year, but there has been energy efficiency work done, and so we would hope that there's less fuel needed if there's energy efficiency work being done.
I can speak to that. The amount of gallons identified in the RFP is explicitly a sample amount based on an average over a period of time, because in any given winter, we might have a mild winter and buy a lot less oil, or we might have a very bitter cold winter and buy more oil. So it doesn't reflect an absolute amount to be purchased. It reflects a multi-year average, so that the companies have an order of magnitude on which they're bidding.
Yes. But are there figures to show that the energy efficiency work is making a difference, that we are reducing our fuel oil?
So the Energy Committee has done a lot of work around that, and we review their work from time to time here at the Select Board meetings, and others of us, work with them throughout the year on different issues. I would say one thing that is hard to gauge, in order to accurately judge how well prior improvements have performed, you got to be able to adjust for things like
It's a different winter. It's
exactly.
always different.
And so that gets tricky. What I would say is the town has made a very substantial commitment to energy efficiency. We did the energy audits 2 years or so ago, and have funded more than half of the items that were recommended, or have actually implemented several of those, and this year are implementing several more. So over time, the town's facilities are becoming much more energy efficient, and some of the heating systems are actually being converted to alternative fuels. So this year, one of the funded projects that's actually going to be implemented is to convert the heating system at the transportation center to a pellet boiler.
And I am glad that is happening as we are experiencing a hot, steamy summer with increased downpours.
Right.
Yeah.
We're only going to get more of that kind of weather. We're going to get, and it's all a result of things that we're continuing to do. We need to move as quickly as we can to reduce our fossil fuel use.
I agree.
And yes, financially responsible, it's costing more and more in other ways to stay using fossil fuels. so that it's financially responsible to get off of fossil fuels as quickly as we can. And I would encourage that as somebody who lives here in town and would like to see Brattleboro continue to do as much as it can.
Thank you.
Thank you, Linda.
And thanks for waiting this long. We appreciate it.
I was trying to see, what did Daniel say?
I hope that gives me a little credit. Good.
He's gonna give you a lot of credit. I just thought there was one other thing he said.
Is there anything else?
I think also while you're looking for whatever you're looking for,
I found
I'll
it.
just, oh, good.
But you go first.
Oh, yeah, thank you. I'll just point out that we're doing a lot of other exciting things, especially, we should talk more about this wonderful solar array that just went online. Because that essentially is taking Brattleboro electricity to 100% renewable in a very short span of time. I'm correct in saying that?
Yeah,
Well, 90%.
We're to 90%.
Which is way ahead of state.
And
yes, the state is not doing well.
And we've received direction from the select board to issue an RFP for local projects to propose to basically receive the additional 10% fund. The additional 10% is a little less than $10,000. So based on the total cost of our electric bill. So 90% of the electricity that we're consuming is being produced by alternative sources. And then for that 10% that isn't, what we intend to do is financially support projects that are happening locally that are invested in developing alternative sources. So the town's intent is, within the next several months to actually be 100% of our electricity being sourced by alternative sources.
Yeah.
That's great. I'm really glad to hear that, and I hope that that gets talked about.
Me too.
So that the public knows that as well. I was really cold here for a while.
Yeah.
And perhaps that's the old system, and renewable sourced electricity is still electricity that you're using, and so I guess that's probably old building.
It is.
It is. You can probably feel right now, unless it's me, it's pretty warm right now.
Now it's gotten warmer,
Right.
yes.
We have a hard time keeping it
It's a bit
at a
possessed.
steady temperature because of the age of the systems in the building.
Yeah.
So in one of the messages from Daniel, one thing that he would probably say if he was in this room is he was kind of looking to the town to see, a possibility of making an actual commitment to get all the way off oil heat. And he's like, by 2024. I don't know, is there anything viable that we can say, we would definitely reduce our heating oil over 3 years? Or is there anything that we can say, are we really still in the exploratory phase with all the upgrades that we've done to energy efficiency? Whether or not that actually will make a difference?
It's a matter of money. You could say
Right, I can say whatever I want.
Well, if the three of you or the five of you 2 weeks from tonight were to say,
Oh, three's better.
we're going to be off fossil fuels by 2024, then the impact of that would be unknown in terms of the total cost to the taxpayers in order to accomplish that goal. If you were to say, we want to get off by 2024 and we want to know what that would cost, we can develop a cost estimate for you and bring that to you in the broad perspective of all of the responsibilities that the select board has in service to the community and town staff and our service to the community. Making that commitment that clearly and strongly means not doing other things that matter to you and to the people that we serve. So I'm not suggesting it's wrong. It certainly is, by the changes we see in our own weather and what we know is going on around, the climate change around the world. This is an issue that has to be addressed. I would suggest that Brattleboro's actions to date show a recognition of the magnitude of this issue and a commitment to making steady progress to do our part. It does not include, our actions today so far do not include that kind of an absolute commitment that would crowd out the annual weighing of priorities for action by town government.
And I think, I mean, I don't think right now is the time to say we're going to do that, because I think it's sort of arbitrary without really understanding. I mean, I think the question that was asked is, and I know we get this, your answer was, we get this from the Energy Committee, but it was a good question, saying, are our energy efficiency methods or things we've implemented actually doing what we think they're supposed to do?
Right.
Because until you mentioned it, I'm like, oh yeah, you're right, we are getting the same fuel that we've gotten last year. What does that mean with where we're going with our energy efficiency? It might mean nothing. We might mean we're doing really great, but as you say, it's hot and cold. So to me, this is me personally, to make a statement as we do this heating oil thing and just throw a number out is not a thoughtful way to do it. And I prefer to be more thoughtful and say, let's look at it, and let's do it in more of the context of, just it's budgetary, but it's also a philosophy. And just make sure if we're putting a number on something, because it's sort of like what the state did. I mean, it's really great to sit up and say, all right, we're going to do something by 20, whatever. And then it has you can't achieve it.
Right.
So I like to figure out, how do you achieve what you really, you push yourselves. I'm not saying we slack off and not do it. But if we could figure out what that number really is and what it really means, and are we doing, are the pellet burners and all that stuff working?
Right. So, for instance, one of the things that we haven't moved forward with because we're not certain of exactly how we're going to renovate this building and what time frame and what the details of that are going to be is the possibility that we might install a pellet boiler system that would serve both the municipal center and the library. That was one of the recommendations in the plan. And that's a very exciting prospect, but as we sit here tonight, none of us could tell exactly when we would be in a position to actually implement that. It might be within that 2024 timeframe, or it might not be within that 2024 timeframe. So certainly at such time as we have a plan and move forward with renovation of the building, there's an opportunity to include in that project the combined pellet boiler system. But I would suggest that making a commitment to the combined pellet boiler system for these two buildings when we don't know the future of this building yet would be a very risky investment to make.
So I wonder if it's less about making a commitment like that, and I agree with all of that. I just wanted to make sure that that's what he asked, and I wanted to repeat that. Maybe it's just about communication and looking at things before we're asked. It'd be great if we could see what are some of the projections in the next 5 years based on some of the work that we've already done, with the energy audits. What is a reasonable scale back based on our energy work? What might a reasonable scale back of heating oil purchases over the next 5 years look like? Just something tangible to kind of show our progress and our projection on that.
We would need to hire somebody who has expertise in that area if you'd really like to see a defensible, objective study of it. What I would suggest to you is, again, depending on the severity of a winter, one problem we're having in having this discussion is, in order for the bidders to have an order of magnitude number so that they understand whether we're going to buy a little bit or we're going to buy a lot, we put a number in the document. When we put the number in the document, it arouses a lot of public attention. The fact is, we have no plan to buy 77,000 gallons of oil. We could possibly even buy more. We hope not to. The measures that we've taken should, over time, reduce our annual consumption. That number actually reflects a recent multi-year average of our annual consumption.
Great. Thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah, so, hopefully we'll have a mild winter, and the actions we've taken are going to contribute to consuming less oil, per degree day, and we're going to consume a lot less than that gallonage.
And I feel, I'm sorry, Tim.
Oh, and I was just going to say, for such big ticket items as boilers can be, we have a responsibility to act in responsible ways to the taxpayers. Even those taxpayers that don't necessarily agree with that strategy being up front, I feel like I have a responsibility to speak for them. And not to be super energy nerdy, but there's considerations in Pellet boilers, for instance, when you switch over to pellets, you are increasing particulates, for instance.
Yeah, I'm not actually. That's a story for another day.
No, I'm just saying, there's pros and cons
Like a
to
heat
every
pump
heating
girl.
source. There is no such thing as a perfectly clean heating source.
Yeah. And I mean, I think we've been very clear as a board that we want to do what's right, you know, for the environment. And some of us do have, you know, financial, you know, we worry about certain different things about it. But I think we all are on the same page, and I think we've shown our commitment, you know, to doing what's right. And at the budget time, we look at that stuff and
Right.
we do what we can do. So,
Yep, I agree with that.
that's-
Cool.
That wasn't him on you, I'm sorry. I'm like gunky, and that's why I drank all this water.
And two other board members could chime in.
yeah, if they'd like to.
I mean, not right now. At a future meeting.
Right,
we
a
can
future
bring it up.
Right.
Yep. So do we want to make a motion now?
For now, we'll have to buy some heating oil,
Yeah.
unfortunately. I think it's
can't.
your turn, Frank.
I'm all over it. But I will make a motion to award the 2018-2019 heating oil bid to Discount Oil of Keene, New Hampshire in the amount of $2.289 per gallon.
We have a motion to award the 2018-2019 heating oil bid to Discount Oil of Keene, New Hampshire. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Anyone opposed? Motion carries 3-0. Great. Our final order of business is that we have, as we know, Rod Francis, our planning director, has moved on. And we have a couple of, or actually 3 committees that Rod was serving on, or organizations. Windham Regional Commission, he was the acting zoning administrator, and he was on the Hinsdale Brattleboro Bridge Project Advisory Committee. So we need to replace Rod. Staff is recommending that Planning Director Sue Fillion steps in and takes Rod's place. I think our decision is, do we want to have Sue do it, or do you want to look for someone else?
Yes, and if I might just clarify, we believe that for the acting zoning administrator particularly, but also for the Hinsdale Brattleboro Bridge Project Advisory Committee, that it is
It has to be Sue.
not just appropriate but necessary
Yep.
that it be Sue with her expertise and official position with the town. The Windham Regional Commission is the place where there's a discretion for the board to exercise over whether you wish to continue the tradition of having the planning director serve in that position, or whether you wish to open that up to the public.
Does she want it? Sorry, Kate.
Yes, I mean, she's interested in serving if you appoint her to serve.
And Rod has been serving for like ever, is that correct? Or-
I don't know exactly how long. I know historically over the years, the town has sometimes had citizen representatives there and has sometimes had the planning director be there in all the time that I've been here for the last 3.5 years, and for some period of time prior to that, it's been the case that it's been the planning director and the planning commission chair
And it's-
who
it is-
serve together at the Wyndham Regional Commission representing the town.
And it is Elizabeth McLaughlin.
And she still is continuing within her prior appointment.
And she can, I mean, she's a citizen. She's not a town staff.
No, that's correct.
Right,
She's a
okay.
citizen appointed by the select board to the
Okay.
planning commission and elected by her peers to be the chair of the commission.
Okay, but Sue's willing to do it.
Yes.
Okay. So, what's everyone thinking?
She wants to do it.
Sounds
The
like a
rest of it seems,
Okay,
good idea to me.
yeah.
Would you like a motion?
go for
You
it.
keep getting these 4-part motions.
Is that 4 parts?
I don't know. Do I have them on a piece of paper? Oh, no, you're right.
You're right. This is mine. I'll make a motion to appoint Planning Director Sue Fillion to represent the town of Brattleboro on the Windham Regional Commission. And also to appoint, Planning Director Sue Fillion to be the town's acting zoning administrator at all times when zoning administrator Brian Bannon is not available. And finally, to appoint Planning Director Sue Fillion to represent the town of Brattleboro on the Hinsdale Brattleboro Bridge Project Advisory Committee.
We have a motion to appoint Sue Fillion to three committees, or whatever they are. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries 3-0. And our very last order of business is to announce committee vacancies.
All right.
So would somebody want me to read them, since I haven't read anything all night?
Sure.
We have the Agriculture Advisory Board, where we have 10 vacancies. The Arts Committee has 1 vacancy. Citizens Police Communications Committee has 1 vacancy. Conservation Commission has 2 vacancies. The Development Review Board has 2 vacancies for alternates. The Design Review Committee has 1 vacancy for an alternate. The Energy Committee has 2 vacancies. Energy Coordinator, 1 vacancy. The Inspector of Lumber, Shingles, and Wood, 1 vacancy. Planning Commission, 1 vacancy. Senior Solutions Advisory Council, 2 vacancies. SEVCA has 1 vacancy. I don't know what recommendation only means, but.
What that means is that rather than appointing someone to serve in that position, you make a recommendation and the SEPCA board decides whether or not to appoint the person.
Perfect. Traffic Safety, the Chamber of Commerce recommendation has 1. And we're actually working on that, just to put that out there to everybody. And Weigher of Coal, there's 1 vacancy. And so people should apply through the town manager's office. You can go on the website, and there's a handy dandy form.
And that's a great variety of things that you could
It is.
choose from to be involved in. Energy Coordinator and Arts Committee and Development Review Board. I mean, these are great ways to get your feet wet in town government.
And, am I wrong, though, if you're an alternate on the DRB, you might not be called as often as
Yeah, I would think
a
so.
regular member, so it might be a way to dip in your feet into the water.
Do it.
You out there.
And everybody out watching. Okay, I'd love a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We have a motion to adjourn. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Jan.
Thank you.
Come back on the 21st.
Thank you, Chris.
Chris, we noticed you didn't sneak out this time like you tried last time.